You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Find more great shows like this at wearelibertarians.com.
All right, let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together. You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to We Are Libertarians. This is episode, I believe, 440, June 9th, 2020. It is, man, there is a ton going on, and we're going to talk about all of it tonight. Going to talk to our good friend Remso Martinez. He's here. Harry's here. We got a hold of Harry. He's been down in the bunker, and Reinhold will be here. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Warning. This show is for adults, produced by semi-adults. So the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to We Are Libertarians, where our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. We examine current events from a libertarian perspective while treating modern politics with all of the irreverence it deserves.
There has been lie after lie.
We toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, a 15-year veteran of politics and media, Chris Spangle.
Welcome to the program. It's nice to see you all. My name is Chris Spangle. Back, man, it's been a week. We haven't done a podcast in a week. It's been months since we've been doubling up, doing all kinds of episodes. And one person that's missed a lot has been our good friend Harry. I'm trying to unmute you, Harry, but you're going to have to do it yourself. Harry, how are you doing?
I'm going good. Feels good to be around people and see everyone again.
It's nice to see you. I was having dinner and with a lady, and I was saying, I can't wait to talk to Harry. It's been like a month at least since I've talked to Harry. So you're never around. It's like you're busy with your job or something. It's really offensive.
Yeah. We have actually, work has given us more work than that we could produce. We have broken records on how much stuff we have printed and shipped out.
Wow.
And it's still not enough.
Yeah, and if you want to support them and us, then you can go to wearelibertarians.com and hit up the store. And James Neese will personally touch all of your items. Does Neese still work there?
No.
Let's move on. Reinhold, how are you doing? Reinhold, I talk to you all the time.
Yeah, I never shut up.
Yeah, me neither.
Been noticed by some people.
I know. We're joking in the chat today that 2020 has turned full Ryan Lindsay, and all of a sudden you're the sane centrist in the libertarian movement. I don't know how that happened.
Well, I was always the same centrist. It's just that you need that other side to balance it because there's a lot of on the right? So
I honestly can't believe that. I think Donald Trump is a plant from George Soros who is in cahoots with AOC, because I've never seen more white people, Christian conservative suburbanites, talking about woke racial issues and in the right way. And then now they're debating abolishing the police. It's truly a heretic magazine dream come true.
Just look at what it took for us to get there the last 3 years, to finally have the plan unfold in front of us.
Yeah. And then also joining us tonight is, hey, Remso. I'm like, if you put the text in front of me, I'm going to read it just like Ron Burgundy. It's Remso Martinez, who has just joined the network. He is part of the We Are Libertarians Network with his podcast On the Run, which you can find at wearelibertarians.com or any podcast network. Remso, thanks for joining the network and thanks for coming on tonight.
Dear leader, it's an absolute pleasure of mine. You know, I remember when we were talking about when to air the show, I said, maybe hopefully after Rona is over, because I want to have some non-Rona topics. I want to get weird. I want to get crazy. I want to get personal, hot and heavy with people. So now we're putting out episodes because this is just never going to end. And frankly, when I have topics about people going to jail for stealing Alexander Hamilton's dueling pistols and studying ancient forms of Judaic mysticism, and this is the normal stuff, then everything else is just beautiful.
I know our current event show has turned into some sort of bizarre. I love the show. I listened to the Alexander Hamilton episode, and it was a wild story. It was I did not expect it. And you're having this conversation with this like very erudite, educated man about all kinds of policy topics in New Jersey. And then all of a sudden, I got drunk on Four Loko. And I went, what? And then and I was wearing a colonial costume. I was like, it was a great story. People definitely have to go check it out.
I've always been a fan of the Twilight Zone, but I never thought we'd all be living in an episode of the Black Mirror, and this is what it feels like. It's so strange. When that, of all things, is what's normal in people's lives, they're like, this story doesn't sound like it's out of the realm of possibility.
So 439 was my magnum opus. Basically, I got pissed off after watching Donald Trump's thing, opened up all the things that I'd shared on Facebook for the past week and did an episode on it. And I thank you so much, those of you who hit me up and said that it was a good episode. I'm proud of it, and I am never proud of any episode I ever do. I'm hypercritical of myself. So please share that with friends. Really, it seemed to hit people in the right way. So please hit share on that. So I've said a lot about it. I will say, just kind of catching up on the week, because there's just, I don't even know where we start. Do we start with the coronavirus? Do we start with pandemics? Or do we start with the race riots and the racial relations and the ever expanding conversation about rights? Or do you talk about Donald Trump just being a complete insane person? When we last left you, Donald Trump had just used tear-inducing gaseous substances that was not tear gas, even though a few days later, it was confirmed that it was tear gas. And he didn't order it. It was just Bill Barr had ordered the clearing of those protesters who was working for Donald Trump. And he basically, the story has come out now, is Donald Trump, his base was dropping. His numbers are in the toilet, and evangelicals are starting to erode. And so he felt he needed to do something to shore up evangelicals. And so he used gaseous substances that cause tears on peaceful protests, beat them with the batons, including journalists. You watch one journalist from Australia in a video just get beaten as they're trying to clear the park. There's thousands of people who saw exactly what everybody said happened. It's not fake news, even though the Trump campaign said that night never happened. It totally happened. There's hundreds of people on Twitter that confirm exactly what happened. Uses it to clear people out. It's a clear abuse of power. Uses violence in a very personal way to walk to a church, to hold a Bible upside down in front of a church I don't believe has visited, didn't even pretend to pray. And then when somebody goes, "Is that your Bible, sir?" "It's a Bible." Direct quote. Also, he could make a video because the night before he had gone down to inspect a bunker, even though the Secret Service had put him into the bunker because they were worried about protesters overriding the gates. Apparently, I don't know what that was, but he was in the bunker. But he wasn't in the bunker because he was afraid. He wants you to know he was just inspecting it. And so he had to go out and bravely face the protesters by gassing them out of his way so he could film a campaign commercial using the sacred text and sacred spaces of my faith so he could try to manipulate me into voting for him. And that really was like the best thing that happened this week. You
haven't heard about the cannibals?
The cannibals. So
you check my bingo card.
I think here's where I'll start the discussion, and then we'll kind of go around because we haven't talked to Harry since the George Floyd killing. I'd love to hear both Remso and Harry's perspective on it, and Reinhold too. Although who wants to hear from another old white man? But, this was the week, these last couple weeks, and I've noticed a shift in things. And you can never say it's over because coronavirus was like literally 95, 100 days ago when it began. And we've got 145 days till the election. So you can never make the mistake that this is going to turn the election. But I personally went from somebody that somewhat agnostic to Trump. If you listen to our impeachment episodes, I'm arguing with Reinhold saying, just give it a break. Like you guys with your Trump derangement syndrome. I have to make a public apology to Reinhold now. Everything he said about the guy for 4 years has been completely right. Like his authoritarian tendencies came out in full display. in just not just that incident, but the call with the governors right the day before, where you have to dominate them. I mean, the politics of domination. Domination is a term in political science. Think colonialization. It's when a state has complete control over the people of a geographical area, not just another country, and can do with them whatever they want. I mean, think African slavery, think 17th century colonialism. That is what domination means in political science terms. Now, I'm not going to pretend that he's read enough political science books to understand that term, but when you're talking about dominating people so they get the message that you're the power and they're not, I think this was the week where the mask slipped off. You know, allegedly, he said in a meeting that he wanted 10,000 troops after the Cotton New York Times article, which we could cover that too. And Esper pushed back, Barr pushed back and said, you can't do that. Barr, of course, later said that was not true, but he's racking up Dick Cheney lied numbers right now. So I think this was the week for me where it kind of went from agnosticism and the judges are great and there's been the regulations are, and it's good because it kind of shows Americans how politics works and give the guy a chance to fuck this guy. I'm not going to vote for Biden, but I hope the rest of you do. And I'm sure I will change my mind at some point. But I mean, it was like, what? I mean, it really, you just start to see Donald Trump go, I don't know if Kenneth is talking about me, but Kenneth says, thank you. Next person, please. It really was stunning. So first, let me start with Reinhold and say, this is your moment to gloat, because all of those of us who didn't listen went this week, that authoritarian thing may be true.
Just a little bit. And remember, it's been, I think it was last week, was 4 months since the impeachment hearings ended. 4 months.
4, right.
It's not been a year and a half, 2 years.
January, I can't remember January.
Yeah, and it's a little crazy. And then what's also interesting is watching the complete implosion that's happening with Donald Trump. He's not stopping. He's not grabbing a hold and catching stopping the free fall. He's diving in and doubling down on it.
I mean, today was one of his worst. I mean, it registers in one of his worst moments, but we won't remember it tomorrow. Where the guy in Buffalo who was walking up there, the conservative press has their own narrative because we know what they're up to right now. But the guy in Buffalo, who's a 70-something-year-old man, was carrying a police helmet. Police push him down. He falls backwards. Head starts bleeding out. The police said he tripped and fell. And then in the Buffalo Police Department, basically the story was they said, you're all on your own. And that the police resigned, 54 of them, from a special team, and said, if our police unions and our politicians are not going to support us, we're not going to go out and control these riots. But it got reported initially as they all quit the force to support the two guys that beat this guy up, basically. And so Donald Trump releases his name today and calls him an Antifa member. And he's forever changed that guy's life, because he will now have reactionaries trying to kill him and blowing up. And I mean, that will follow him forever. And so who knows if he's Antifa or not. But even if it's 100% true, everything he said in the tweet, is it right for the head of the United States government to target a private citizen for their political beliefs and open them up to death threats and the level of harassment that we all know this guy's going to get? That's just a blip in all this. That's just one day. So he's really out of control.
We'll forget about it the next 2 days or so when he gives his nice race speech written by Stephen Miller.
And he's going to save it with a race speech written by Stephen Miller. Now, Remso, you have a different persuasion than Reinhold and I, which we're going to talk about tonight. What's your opinion of Stephen Miller? I'd love to hear what you think, because you follow the news pretty closely, so I'm sure you know what's going on there.
It's always been kind of strange because it seems like every other day they just add a new cast to the Trump cinematic universe. And, I'd be lying if I said I was caught up with everybody. What I do know about Stephen Miller is what I don't know. It's the fact that if you're on the right, you have to defend him like it's, a member of your family if you're your last dying breath. And if you're on the left, he's, a white nationalist, a racist, and all this other stuff. I've done very little research on him, but what I can tell you is he might have different opinions than I do on immigration, on law enforcement, things like that. I've never really seen anything that I would say makes me think, oh, this guy hates non-white people. So this whole, oh, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a homophobe, he's all this other stuff. If it's out there, then no one's shown me anything that could convince me otherwise. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that with what I've been able to see, I don't see it. But then again, I see this with really everybody. We're in the politics of absolute destruction. And you mentioned this earlier with the political science definition of domination. In some schools, we called it power politics. At the Helm School of Government at Liberty University, we called it the politics of absolute warfare and other things like that. It's you are inherently my enemy and you are everything terrible in the world just because you're on the opposite side of this when it comes to me. And honestly, I can't really be fazed by any of this. What we're doing right now, and this only becomes more evident because we're in a general election year, is everyone's looking for a savior. Everyone wants Donald Trump to fix everything. Everyone wants Joe Biden to fix everything. And the thing is that we are far too complicated as a country. We're far too different as people alone to require one person to save us. And I even say it trickles down to all forms of government. We're seeing this now. We're seeing massive distrust. And whether or not you've lost faith in society or now you're just really starting to question it, what we really need to do is understand what's really happened. I'm not surprised by the riots. I'm not even surprised, nor am I really angry about what Trump did over near, the church near the White House, because they've been saying they were going to do this. Anyone that said that this came out of nowhere and they were completely shocked, I'm not saying I was ahead of it, but I wasn't surprised by it.
They were saying who, what, when, where.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to happen. And when Maxine Waters was screaming at that rally around the midterm elections, and she was like, hassle them at gas stations, hassle them at restaurants, march in the streets and everything, follow them at home, go to their homes, I took her very seriously. I mean, we're seeing people go to Tucker Carlson's house near Georgetown and completely terrorize his wife and kids just because a talking head on TV has an opinion they don't like. I don't like a lot of people on TV. Doesn't mean I'm going to go scream at their houses. When I think that the people in the talking box have actual direct impacts on my life, then I have bigger problems that I'm ignoring to go ahead and focus on that. So I think we're in it to really understand that this is nothing new. This is nothing that's going to be of absolute consequence. Maybe this hurts them. Maybe it doesn't. I think I'm too dumb to really predict how things are going to result in November. But the one thing I will say is this. If before that day you liked Trump, you probably still found a reason to like him. If before that day you didn't like Trump, you just found another reason not to like him. I think we're so far back into our own bunkers, we're willing to justify just about anything to get the results we want.
Dennis? Excuse me, Reinhold?
I would take a exception to a little bit of that because I have no problem with seeing certain people in the Trump White House and not hating them, right? Or not identifying them as racist or anything like that. Stephen Miller was outed by having a membership and participating in a neo-Nazi white supremacist group online forum. And I had
no clue about that.
Yeah, he is not idle there either. He wrote things, right? So they've been calling for him to be removed from the administration for a year almost.
That makes sense.
It was actually not that long ago. It was like 4 months ago, I think.
My gut tells me that Stephen Miller is the guy that wrote the tweet with the segregationist quote in it a week or two ago. Like, I don't think that Donald Trump, I do think Donald Trump is an intelligent person, and I do think that Donald Trump is a genius at PR and getting attention for himself. And I'm not going to pretend that he's a dumb person, but I do not believe that Donald Trump has a firm ideology or an end game. Donald Trump enjoys winning and power and being in charge. I think.
So I have a quick question about the group, though. Like, I'm not Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Stephen Miller to me is a person with a specific ideology and a worldview, and is one of those people that is probably taking advantage of his position with Trump and is writing tweets. It's why he's offering to write the race speech. It's a horrible idea because Stephen Miller specifically is a person that has very problematic behavior and quotes. And so this is a guy that you're going to turn to and write your race speech. All you're going to do is inflame, which is exactly what Stephen Miller and Donald Trump want. They don't want division. And that's why the Mattis statement, Mad Dog Mattis comes out, the former Secretary of Defense, the general, and says, this is the first president in my lifetime that doesn't unite the American people. And the important caveat that he added, doesn't even try to unite because I don't think any of us would look at, the last three presidents specifically and say these are uniting figures. They had their moments, but they did engage in that kind of partisan bickering politics and of division. Whereas Donald Trump feeds off it. Donald Trump doesn't have the ability to give a uniting speech because it's so fundamentally in his DNA, which is why he was elected. His voters, his base, want liberal tears. They're not looking for reconciliation. They're looking for division. They're looking for that toxic poison because they buy his bullshit about being victims. And I think that Stephen Miller is probably he's one of the last men standing in this White House who has kept his position consistently. And I think Trump relies on him maybe more than any of us realize at this point, because he's one of the presidents have a tendency, once they feel kind of isolated and fenced in, to turn to the original group of people. That's why Lewandowski's still on these phone calls, Nick Ayers, they're all kind of still in there. So I mean, you had a question, Remso, about the Stephen Miller stuff, and then Reinhold. We'll start with Stephen Miller, and then we'll kind of move towards the politics of division and unity that you kind of opened up, Remso.
Yeah, Reinhold, I trust your opinion more than I trust, CNN and a bunch of other places. So my question isn't coming from, trying to be a gotcha thing. I am just genuinely curious. When a media outlet labels something far right or white nationalist or something, I'm a bit jaded because I don't think they have a great consistency in terms of their record of accusing people of being certain things. Was the group really that, or was it just like a group full of Trump people who just like to say?
No, it was that.
Okay, then that completely changes. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So if you see that and you know what that stuff is,
right? See,
I believe that makes sense to me.
That's the thing is I won't go out and call anybody a racist unless I think that they've proven that they are. Right. So there's this whole fight inside libertarianism about certain people being racist adjacent or defending racists and things like that. And it's like, yeah, there's things that they do for the different reasons than racism, because they see things in a different view. Like they're kind of blind to it because they're not thinking about it that way. And they're more interested in crushing their opponents. So they don't recognize that some of the things they say or do are problematic to people who are, who do see this stuff.
Of a different ideology or a different culture, maybe is the way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
illustrated like we said before,
something like, and I would definitely say that I've fallen into this. Like, we have a Confederate monument that is being removed today here in Indianapolis. And what this is it is a big 34-foot limestone grave marker for the 1,616 Confederate soldiers that died at Camp Morton here in Indianapolis. And it's got all of their names on it. And it was created in like a 1912 to put over the bodies in Greenlawn Cemetery. And then when Greenlawn Cemetery had to shut down because of railroads and they moved the bodies to Crown Hill, which is the big cemetery in Indy, they couldn't fit the monument over that space. They created another separate one that just kind of said, here's the bodies. It's a little more mundane. And so the Southern Club of Indianapolis took possession of that monument and put it at the gate of the largest park at the time, Garfield Park, down on the south side. And if you go and read the history of the South Side Club of Indianapolis, it's a Klan group. And so when they moved this in the 20s, when the Klan ran this state under D.C. Stevenson, and we had a Klan governor in Ed Jackson, and we had a Klan mayor. And then when D.C. Stevenson got arrested for killing a woman, Madge Oberholtz, the governor had to resign, the mayor had to resign, and it basically blew the lid off of Klan politics here in Indiana in the 1920s, because the Klan moved from the South, started in Evansville, Indiana, and then became extremely powerful across the Midwest by targeting Catholics and Jews more than blacks in the Midwest in the 1920s. And it was basically a political power club. But the point of the Confederate Monument in Garfield Park for this long, according to not just the Southern Club and the articles that you read about it at the time, because I went and looked up the research this past week and did a couple hours on it. You look at this cop in 1991 who was trying to get George Bush to give him money to move the monument, and he was eventually fired from the police force for killing an unarmed black man. And it came out that he was in a neo-Nazi group. And so this cop that was quoted in the Indianapolis Star today saying he was mad about this being taken down and was trying to take possession of it is still, after 30 years, interested in this single monument, who has neo-Nazi ties.
Well, shit.
And so the Confederate monuments were mass produced in the 1910s and 20s as part of the Lost Cause movement. And it was a way to remember the Confederate soldiers that bravely fought too and died. And so we need our own monument for them. But the intent for every generation for this specific grave marker that I walked by it last week because I go to that park all the time, is, and you go, we're a Union state. Why is there a giant Confederate statue here? It makes no sense. The point is white supremacy. The point has, for every generation of supporters of this monument, meant to remind people who are not white Anglo-Saxon Protestants that you're less than, that you are. But if you were a conservative that voted for Bush and you're just out there, you don't know the history of that monument. You don't know the intent of that monument. You just want to protect our history. You go, well, why wouldn't you want that there so people remember that there was a Camp Morton? That's not in and of itself a racist thought, right? Like, I want to protect history, and I don't know where am I going to have to give? Where am I going to have to budge on my heritage, right? Where am I going to have to budge on my history? We're going to start tearing down Washington monuments, right? But because you're trying to stop the advance of cultural Marxism. But by doing that, you are using tools of white supremacy to fight cultural Marxism. And so what that codes as to liberal people, minorities, people of color, and people who do know the history, they code that as you're a white supremacist. And that's the conversational breakdown that we're having right now, is that people on the right are watching Tucker Carlson. They are hearing things that do make completely logical sense. And Tucker Carlson himself may not, or some of these libertarian podcasters that, you know, Nick can't help but get himself in a fight with in ludicrous displays on Twitter, they're not looking at that history and seeing what maybe Reinhold is seeing or what maybe Nick is seeing. They're seeing something completely different, operating from a different set of facts. And so that's part of the conversation that is taking place in this country. But in a lot of ways, it's right Christian conservatives who are not willing to have any kind of conversation about any of this. No, I'm not giving up my monument. Sorry, I'm going to protect history, as opposed to doing an hour of research on the monument and going, yeah, look at the cop from 1991 who was trying to protect this with the neo-Nazi ties. Look at the 1960s group who had the Klan ties, who was trying to get this monument beautified. Here's the historical record. It's in the newspaper at the time. Here's the article from the 30s where the Klansmen are talking about the importance of this monument. Here's the article from the 20s and from the 10s. The history of it is very clear, but nobody ever looks at that history. They just look at, I want to protect history, as opposed to trying to discern what this piece of history may mean to other people. And so where I come down on a lot of this is that I don't look at monuments like this being torn down as divisive. It may feel divisive, but I see that as us going, there's some fucked up part of American history that we do have to recognize, like the Klan running Indiana in the 20s. And we have to recognize that there may be ghosts of that in our police forces that may need to be reformed. There may be certain attitudes that we have on the right, especially that may code differently to other people, but we're never going to understand that if we don't have a conversation around that. And so what a Stephen Miller does is understand that history and use that history to avoid the conversation completely, to inflame your anger at the removal of monuments, because they're going to steal your history. If you don't fight Antifa, they're going to fight you on your driveway in Avon, Indiana. And if you can't protect yourself because they're going to steal all your guns and then they're going to come loot you, then you have one choice in this election. You have to vote for self-protection. You have to vote for Donald Trump, because if you don't, they may overrun the country. They may overrun the courts. They may overrun your Walmart. They, right? And so part of the objection that libertarians and that people of color and that liberals and everybody is having with people like Donald Trump is that we know the history. We know Stephen Miller knows the history because he's an intelligent, bright person. We know he has very disturbing views on immigration and says it proudly. We know what you're doing, right? Like, that's what I think drives people like Reinhold crazy about Donald Trump. Is it's sort of like watching right now. It's like watching your conservative friends, especially Christian. It's why it's not Trump Derangement Syndrome in that everything Donald Trump does is drive you crazy. It's that people like Reinhold can't fucking believe that you're falling for this. Am I wrong?
That's exactly right. That's the biggest. It's just like, can you not see what he's saying is the same thing that was being said 80 years ago for the same reasons, to try to whip up people against other people. He's just doing it. I mean, he's not doing it because he's a racist. He's doing it because he doesn't care. He just wants power. He wants loyalty. All the people like Stephen Miller, Stephen Miller is going to be there for the rest of his term, not because Donald Trump necessarily agrees with him, but because he is loyal. And that's all that he cares about in this administration now, is people that are loyal to him, whether they do a good job or not, as long as his base likes those people too. And that's all that matters to him.
So Remso, it's kind of like you have a friend, and let's say it's a female friend, and your female friend is dating a guy that, like, she can't see as dangerous because she's in puppy love, but enough guys to know that this is not a guy you want your friend dating. And you like gently kind of say, like, hey, this guy's trouble. Oh, no. And then you don't understand what it's like. So I think that's kind of the epiphany that I've had over the last couple of weeks, is like, I finally kind of get it, because I've kind of been of the same mindset of you, where no, the media. A lot of our comments are, like Josh, the media holds some responsibility for us not believing him, though. They've breathlessly been decrying the color of his tie since he was inaugurated. I totally agree with that. Everything isn't a scandal. So, yeah, it is really. Does that make more sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, the last comment that just came up, if you could bring it up, I think people need to see that. It's one of those things that a lot of people are really struggling with right now. And I mean, I think Josh is 110%. And I see this in the Beltway all the time. I've seen it since before I got into media, when I was a political consultant. What we're dealing with is not how do I fix things? How do I make things better? Once people obtain power, the only priority they have is to keep it. So, it's gotten to the point now where I know if I'm getting exhausted, if I'm getting tired, and if I'm, having a hard time believing things that otherwise would make sense, I can only imagine how it is for your apolitical voter out there, your person who rarely tunes in, who's either your liberal CNN watcher or your Fox News Republican, and they don't really dive into the nuance. They're just kind of waiting what to be told next. It makes it really complicated. And I mean, I'm glad that Reinhold did his homework on Stephen Miller. There have been other people in the Trump administration where I've looked at them and I've just been like, why the hell is that person there? And then, I meet people who are connected to them and they're like, oh no, you got to give them a chance. They're a good person. I've met a lot of so-called good people in politics that turned out to be criminals, drug dealers, pimps, potential murderers, absolute hardcore racists. But ultimately,
Hillary Clinton.
I mean,
Allegedly.
Allegedly. If I wind up dead in a jail cell, you know who did it. But it's at the point now where it's like what I began to realize was the only reason why they defend those people is that they all have something to protect. And that's what this is all about. There was a funny TikTok video about this liberal teenager reading a Trump campaign email asking for donations. It was like, oh, get your Trump 2020 hat so people know you're part of the president's defense. And she's taking that as, oh my gosh, this is the wake-up call for the new Holocaust. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, I can't tell whether this is satire or whether or not that's what she genuinely believes. But this is where we've come. I stopped being mad at politicians probably like 4, 5, 6 months ago. I had this epiphany. Somebody keeps having to give them permission to go back. We had like Strom Thurmond from South Carolina, I think. The dude was there until he was like deaf, mute, and invalid. And it's like, who kept sending him back there? Why is Nancy Pelosi going back? Why does Mitch McConnell keep going back? Who keeps sending all these people back? And then I had to realize not any amount of special interest group money or pop culture topics or whatever is going to ever be as forceful as voters on election day.
Yeah.
Yep. I've always said that is that we have the government that we want. I mean, we're voting these people in. So if how can we complain about the people that we're voting in being in there doing those things they're doing when we keep voting them in? That's why I'm like, get rid of Trump. If whoever gets in there next, if it's Biden or Jorgensen or whoever, if they're not doing what you want them to do, get rid of them and put someone else in next. Don't keep sending these people back. Try other people, try different things, try affecting the changes you want to see yourselves, and don't worry about government doing it for you or politicians doing it for you, because they're always going to let you down and they're always going to do it wrong. Do it yourself. Go out and start organizations. Take care of those things you care about so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Take the power away from them.
And Remso, and I'll go to you in just a second, Harry, because you've been eerily quiet. But Remso referenced it. It's Hayek's knowledge problem. There is not one person who can understand the full knowledge, or even a small group of people that can understand the full knowledge of a society. The market is the only way to distribute knowledge effectively and build peaceful cooperation, because once you start central planning, then that one person essentially starts failing. It's what we talked about with the CDC. You centralize the failure or success in the CDC and they fail, then you have hundreds of thousands of people die instead of tens of thousands of people die. And so it goes back to Hayek's knowledge problem. So Harry, get in here. I'm sure you have a ton of thoughts.
All right. So I'm glad that the plan of attack is to vote harder, vote again, and keep voting. This will work out.
Our resident voters.
Vote
I finished
harder.
it up with the agorism. Don't.
I know. I'm not going to give you too much of a hard time because I can understand what you're saying and what you're trying to accomplish. I get that. And the whole idea of the aspect of, you're right. Once one person tries to essentially plan different things start falling apart. It's the reason why a lot of people hate these phased back of trying to restart the economy after shutting everything down for the Rona, because one person has no idea how many moving parts that are going through the economy right now.
Right.
Our factory stayed open because we just said, screw it. We're just going to keep going until someone actually tells us to stop. Yeah. And even when the police came to the door, we just, oh, no. We just kept going.
It's a protest.
Yeah, they're not serious. They're not serious. Just keep going. They're going to do anything. So we just kept going. But it's good that it's a, and that's why the whole confusion of what's essential, what wasn't essential. It's this one person's trying to plan out how to shut everything down and how to bring everything back. And they have no idea how to turn everything back on. There's but we can't turn it on back at once. honestly, that's the only thing you can do because you have no idea what's going on out there. You
Yeah,
cannot tell me.
idea of a stair step back to society is as dumb as the stair step down. Like someone was, I shared that the World Health Organization yesterday said that asymptomatic carriers are not all that effective at carrying it, and then they said that they are today, and they kind of flip-flop back and forth, and that was a lot of people on my Facebook going, why should we even trust these people? And honestly, after nothing happened after the Michigan protests and there weren't big spikes around the country after those protests, I kind of went, and I think in a week to 2 weeks, we're going to kind of know. Now, I've seen and heard that while there isn't socially distancing, almost everybody that attends these rallies are wearing masks. But still, that doesn't totally make you safe and secure. And so the trust in experts has gone away completely. So, and everybody's citing these experts. And this is something you should keep in mind when you're listening to political talk. Everybody cites these experts that say protesting to end systemic racism is good. Go ahead and do it. They never say who, how many, where. There's never really any details when it's kind of just talked about the general notion. They're just beating up on the experts. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the solution for the pandemic was government, and you politicized the solution. And so when you politicize the solution, people feel they're a part of it, and they feel resentment towards it, especially if you keep changing information, which is totally logical, right? Like something that a brand new disease, a brand new virus, we're less than 6 months in. I expect you to not know everything about this thing and change over time. Mm-hmm. But when people resent you because of the way that you have socially engineered them, expect them no longer to listen to you, especially when people in your field start saying things like, these protests do matter, so go ahead. If we lose 10,000 people to end systemic racism, okay. That's where it starts to, instead of the private market informing people, letting people be adults, make their own decisions, start to understand the risks. Then as information changes, they have less resentment towards the people giving them information because they're not being socially engineered. They're being given information that they can then act on and make rational decisions, Harry.
Yeah, it is. You are right. Here in a few days, we're really going to find out if a lot of the social distancing thing, all this stuff, like, and everything we're finding out, we're gonna figure this out in about, like 3-4 days. The other thing with it is, it's not only are they politicizing the cure, they're also politicizing your reaction. So they're going to, you want to be seen as doing something and trying to do the best thing you can do. And I'm doing this for science. And you're also watching how people are doing things because they don't want to be liable, So like, so if you got like you can really find out who, one, doesn't want to be liable, or two, is it's an election year and they want to be seen as doing something. So you'll get a judge, a sheriff in any type of local terrorists, like, wants to be shown either doing something or either allowing people to defy the lockdown order or going to severely enforce the lockdown order because they feel this is what their base wants. So yes, the political solution to this unknown virus that we all are trying to deal with and learn about at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Sorry, as somebody who really has been locked down as much for this whole thing, it's I always feel weird when I see people come out of it as the first month out, the first week out, and they're like scared to touch things. I'm just like, dude, I don't care.
Dude, I was out walking today, and I used to hear that I forgot who said it. I think it was Sanjay Gupta. He was saying that, eventually people start getting used to all the changes we've made because it takes 2 weeks to establish a new habit. And literally, as I'm walking near people, if they see me, they're willing to walk right into the street. Like almost, it's like muscle memory. They're willing to walk into vehicles. And it's going to be really interesting to see what stays and what doesn't stay, because it's going to be something that we're going to probably see years from now. We're going to look at that and we're going to be like, this happens kind of strange. And when did we start that? And then we're all going to talk about the Rousey Rona situation.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that's definitely going to stay is people allowing you to stay home to work from home.
Yeah.
I think at our I watched several different people and look at all these people staying at home and watching their productivity stay up or even increase, and just showcasing like, look, the budget from these offices and keeping these offices on, like, we don't have to do this. We could just have an office that is a meeting space where they can just come and just bring items so we can fix them. And even that, once we get on, board to Microsoft Autopilot, no, I don't even, you just use a shared space for meeting. That's changing. That's going to stay, which I don't know how that's good. Which I'm worried about is the environmental impact that's going to cause. One, you don't have cars on the road in rush hour just burning gas. That's going to be helpful. But if people are going to stay at home in their inefficient houses with their inefficient AC, and it's just sucking up AC, I don't know how that's going to impact everything. But
I had to go out yesterday for the first time since all this started and go to work. Mm-hmm. And therefore,
you actually went into your office?
I went into. We have two buildings. I went into a building to work with a graphic designer, and then I went to record a podcast for someone. Leaders and Legends, great podcast. Urban with the Urban League drops tomorrow. I was so exhausted. I need another 3 months of quarantine away from people to deal with all the socializing that I had. But I've gained an hour back of my commute at least. And then there's always the extra 30 minutes of, I should go through this drive-through or stop for this gas, or I need to pick this up. Mm-hmm. I'm saving money because I'm not spending money out eating lunch. Mm-hmm. I'm saving gas money. I filled up my tank for the first time. I'm getting 4 weeks to the gallon right now. I'm gaining back anywhere from 2 to 5 hours a day. I'm getting all my work done more efficiently. But I'm getting all this extra time back. And if I work from home and, I have a girlfriend and if she's here, sitting on the couch working too, then that's bonus time with her. It just, why would I want to go back to an office? But one of the costs that I do think, and this spilled out, and I don't know if you want to mention where you work, Remso, but I saw Robbie Sobe from Reason say that part of the reason that there's so much tension at the New York Times over the Cotton article and tension at Vox and tension at some of these media outlets is that people are working from home. They're not having that personal connection. They're on Zoom all day. And so you lose that special bond. And working at a creative field, I can tell you, Harry doesn't come down for the show anymore. So we don't have that extra time to bond. We just talk on the air. We don't have that same face-to-face. I don't have that same face-to-face with my coworkers, so things get a little bit more tense. You take the email the wrong way. It's the difference between going on an in-person date and calling on the phone, and so I wonder if there's going to be tension in the workplace. And we're just seeing it in the media industry first, and they're kind of the canary in the coal mine, and that people will want to go back to work because they don't want to fight with each other.
I agree 100%. And we're working in the newsroom. I can definitely say that everyone has really shown how they prefer to communicate with people. I learned something about myself. I learned that I write very terse, very direct emails.
Yeah, me too.
And I had an altercation with the coworker, not because of anything that was egregious, but because she took an email I sent the wrong way. And then when I read it and then I kind of, listened to her concerns, I'm like, oh, I absolutely see how she took it that way. So now if I'm going to communicate with that person, we're going to talk anyway but text or email. And then I have some people that, they feel they can only really grasp a concept and really feel comfortable with moving on to something if they have to have the face-to-face Zoom meeting that we've been doing. So in many ways, it's really been an opportunity for us to see how we best communicate with each other. But I do really feel that there's still a little bit of that spark missing because I can't go walk over to someone's desk and sit down and drink some coffee with them. I think, the one good thing about this is we're going to give a lot of people the ability to telework permanently. I don't know how things are going to be for me right now, but the way it's looking is I won't have to probably go back into an office again. except maybe once or twice a month for a face-to-face meeting with a client or something. And, that gives me a lot of freedom. You were talking about all the money you're saving and all the time you're getting back. I've seen that with myself. I know a lot of people have, but you also brought up something which is incredibly important. I think Harry also touched on this, whether or not people are going to maintain efficiency. I can tell you for the newsroom, we've been doing like more work than we did when we were sitting down. It's almost funny because the big concern was, are people going to slack? Are people going to be distracted? Can we trust people to do their jobs? And when we look at our reports on everything, we've been doing gangbusters. But I have a friend that runs a business. He runs a team of about 17 people, and they're all in customer service. And I asked him, how have things been for you? Because for us, it's been working great. And he just wiped his face and he was like, man, I really don't trust my people, because I have to be able to review their work at the end of the day. And they're either doing the absolute minimum or they're missing things. And it's stressing me out. I think it's growing pains. Because he's really been only doing this since mid-March. I've been doing this really since late February. So I think for a lot of people, they're going to have to really determine whether or not this is something that is going to be a long-term change. But yeah, I mean, the workplace is changing. I asked why, whether you went into your actual building or not, because I actually went into the Times building a couple of weeks ago to pick up some stuff from my desk, and it just felt weird.
Yeah.
It just felt so strange. How did it feel when you went back in and you actually had to get work done? Because as soon as I grabbed my stuff, I left.
Yeah, no, the drive there was very awkward, and seeing the building, and you get a little nostalgic, and then talking with the graphic designer was really nice, But and maybe the answer to that is how passionate you are for your job. A journalist or someone in the creative field like I'm in, we're passionate about what we're doing. We're self-starters. If you're working for a call center, you're probably not on fire in terms of your passion for that job. And you may not be able to do that at home because you may be cutting corners. I don't know. But Reinhold, you're a work from home warrior for years. I mean, what do you think about all this?
I think it's something that's time is past due. I think a lot of the reason why it took something like this to kind of shake people into doing the working from home thing is just because people were set in their ways for so long and just really resisted it. But I think there's just way too many benefits that come out of it. I mean, just because you work from home doesn't mean you can never go out and interact with people, right? So it's more about being smart about those interactions and making sure they make sense. I work as a consultant, and for years it would be, we'd go work at a consultant site. I'd have to go to another state or, 2 or 3 states over. I have to fly to California or something to meet with a customer because they wanted to meet, the salespeople wanted me meeting them face to face. So we had this connection. I found that I can do the same thing through meetings just because I honed that ability to be able to understand what they're saying by voice inflection and not facial inflections, right? By hearing how they're reacting to what I'm saying, I can better make sure that I'm getting my point across or answering any questions they have and getting the work done. And the customer doesn't have to pay for all that travel for me to go out there. They don't have to pay for my meals and everything else. I don't have to spend the time doing it. I can take that time that I was on the road and work for another client and get more work done, right? So I can get more things done. I'm not clogging the roads up. I really hope that some of the other things that we've kind of taken from this, like the social distancing of 6 feet, maybe even the masks, well, I'd like to see that continue, just because you're going to cut down on not just the coronavirus, but you're going to cut down on the flu. You're going to cut down on a lot of different things that are going around. You're going to lower a lot of health issues that are going to happen because of it. Usually right around school time, the kids get sick and then they take it home to the parents, and the parents take it to work, and it just goes around and around. And I think we're going to see a lot less of that as people start social distancing better and working from home better. We're going to be more healthy that way. And I also think it's going to be a better impact on the environment as a negative, but that remains to be seen, right? So that's going to how that maths out. I don't know if it's going to make a difference or not, but you're going to have less car accidents, right? You're going to have less jammed up fender benders in the traffic, around 465, where it gets certain parts of 465 get basically stop and go. Chicago is horrible during rush hour traffic. So a lot of that's going to alleviate. So I don't know. I think it's a net result where society is going to be going to anyway. And we should have kind of been there. I think we're 3 or 4 years behind on that. So maybe this kind of kicks us back to where we should be and move forward with that.
Correct. And it also helps kickstart like a rural broadband, because like, why do I need broadband at these other houses if I'm going to go to a building that has the, has the fast speed internet access? Ooh, look at that text block.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean that. I put it up there and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. The other thing is with it is like, I like the idea of you introverts staying, working from home, social distancing. Us extrovert huggers, we'll keep our immune system high, and then we'll just take over the whole world once we just start getting there, hugging you introverts. Just take them all out. Nothing brings you joy more than when you pick up your kid from the daycare and you put them in the back of your car and then they just puke and you have no idea what's going on, and then you start puking when you get home too. It's like, what the heck? And you get on the Facebook group and you find out the whole freaking room's got it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, like the kids in their German schools, their German daycares. It's just
German factories. But what he said too is one thing that may happen is that we're going to be like the Martians, who were suddenly not inoculated from the diseases that are floating around because we're protecting ourselves so much.
That's why when I see a mask on the ground, Reinhold, I pick it up and I lick it. I put it on my face and rub it all over my eyes.
If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right?
Exactly right.
Always eat a booger, eat a booger, eat some food off the floor, keep your immune system high.
Try all of the boogers.
My biggest problem during this time, I actually am looking forward to working remotely long term, especially if the way things are going with my office. Hopefully within the next couple of months, I'll learn whether or not I'll be permanently doing this. But I mean, it's the seclusion from people is definitely what is bothering me. And I know that this is something that is affecting a lot of people. I'm not going out as much. I'm a very, I like to travel. Like, that was one of the cool things about DC. If I had to go meet with somebody for work stuff, I could go all over town. I like doing that. I like being able to go and work from the park or work from a Panera or Starbucks during the day. I liked being able to get out of my house. And that's been one of the real struggles, because I found myself just going in my car and just driving around just to get out and do something. I mean, it's just, it's one of those things.
Everybody
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where hopefully when things get back to normal, we'll be able to, socialize and stuff more. But that has really become one of the things that I've noticed has really been affecting me primarily the last month.
So the Facebook, the wall of text that I put up, they said basically, what's weird now is he or she has been work from home. And this has been a strict version, so you're not getting a real representation of what it's like, because you can't go to the gym in the middle of the day. I went to, I always used to go to Orange Theory at noon, and then I go back and finish my work day at the office. I did that today, so it's my life now is sort of back to normal on that. I want you to know, Harry, you best of all know what a professional I am, what a brave broadcaster I am. How I work through the pain. I just had the worst Charlie horse you can possibly imagine. My body is magnesium and potassium starved, clearly, because I'm an athlete. I played through the pain, Harry.
Yep. You play through the pain, come to, work through the cold. I recommend coffee in your pre-workout. Coffee has a lot of potassium in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So put a little coffee in your pre-workout. Should help you out.
It's also diuretic, so it gets you moving on the treadmill faster.
I don't need more diarrhea in my life. I also want to shout out to Kenneth. Chris, you have 3 smart, articulate folks with you. We hear from them more, please? Kenneth, it's my show. My show. I want to take this moment
to get their own show.
Thank our patrons. And
speaking of which,
yes, sir. Remso is a patron. Reinhold is $100 a month patron. Harry is here. Our other $100 a month patrons are Anthony Meyer, Craig DaCosta, Ed Brehab, Jason Doolittle, Jeff Bennett, Christy Avery, Matthew Durbin, and new Brad Tracy, a Twitter friend of mine. And we have gotten to become good friends over the last couple weeks, and I'm ecstatic that he has joined us. Thanks, everybody, for being a patron. Judging by the massive negative amount of money in my Patreon account, I think that I've paid for the merch and it should be sent to you soon. So I want to go back to our original conversation and kind of finish up here, because the original impetus for having Remso on was not just to promote his excellent podcast On the Run, which you should download multiple times, contact your Chinese and Filipino contacts and have them download it multiple times too. But listen to every episode, not just rig the numbers. And so Remso reached out to me and wanted to talk a little bit about racial identity, and Harry has been a big part of that for me too, because going back to what Reinhold said earlier is that before we talked about the monuments, for instance, people, and I definitely fall into this category, like the monument thing, I never would have gotten had I not kind of, first it was Mitch Landrieu, a white guy from Louisiana, giving a speech about these monuments, saying, here's how this affects people different than you, and so I had one version of these monuments based on my identity, and make no mistake, white identity is an identity. Donald Trump plays that to a T, like he's trying to build a white identitarian movement and turn it into like this victimhood identity, which is really weird considering I've heard forever, don't just vote Democrat if you're black, they're taking advantage of you. Now it's vote Republican because you need to anyway. So Sean Hannity's your Al Sharpton is what I'm trying to say. But to understand those different views of things, I really got Harry with that one. He's like, the truth is that Tommy Lauren is just she's Jesse Jackson. You have to get out. You have to have diversity of thought, not just libertarian, but also Republican, Democrat, progressives, seeking out different ways of thinking about politics, but also different identities are really important because it does really speak to our biases. It's how we determine information. When I see a Confederate statue in 2012, it's different than the way I interpret it in 2020, because I have gone out and tried to talk to people other than the ones I look like, think like, and talk like, right? And birds of a feather tend to flock together. And so what initially was really important for my growth and my understanding of what's happening in America in terms of race was having Harry on the podcast and having racial conversations, and Harry going, you don't understand, it's different for me. And I'm like, really? It's different for me? Yes. And then you go, hey, other 15 black friends, like, is it different for you? Yes, it's way different. And eventually you start to get it because you start to go, whoa, I didn't understand this, And so sometimes we have a tendency to only see Antifa as the enemy and be manipulated into a new Red Scare because we're only talking to people who say the same things about Antifa, right? You know, if you break out of your bubble, you start to go, oh, maybe he's overdoing the Antifa thing to try to scare white people into voting for him. Was trying to scare his base into voting for them. And it's like another version of McCarthyism or the Red Scare in 1917. And maybe he's overdoing it. And then it kind of pinpricks the balloon and pops your mind a little bit. And so what I've been encouraged to do and have done over the last year is try to have more conversations with people who are far different than me and make and cause me to think differently, because the way I grew up was in a 98% white town in a suburban neighborhood where everybody was a Republican. And so when I became a political person in my teens and 20s, like, of course I'm a Republican and I'm going to say the same things. I'm going to do the same things. I'm going to go this, and I have the Reagan poster. And then you start to like talk to other people and you go, oh, Reagan and that drug war thing seems really bad. So let's start with Harry. As you kind of watch this conversation over the last couple weeks, or just, overall over the last few years, like, what are you noticing? What are you seeing?
All right. So it is one thing I've had to notice is that sometimes certain videos will come out, will help help other people to notice that things are different. That it even throws my own wife to, like when things are different, like when I got pulled over here in Madison County, and, they asked for my ID and I gave it to her, and then she offered her ID and he goes like, I don't want that. And I was like, hey, why'd you offer your ID? He was like, well, they always ask for yours when you're riding in the passenger seat. But it's
Right.
it is the watching when you first watch the video and you first see the outrage, it's like, okay, here's another one, and this is and it sucks that's what's going on in your brain. Like, here is another example, and you're just kind of braced. So like, all right, how are they going to try to defend this? What crazy thing are they going to come up and investigate? And then you just start watching the actual outrage. There, people actually
By coming out, you mean like, because there's always an out. When it comes like the shootings, there's always an out. Like,
right.
White people, conservatives generally, oh, he has a record, or
Right.
well, but Chicago. There's always, is that what you mean?
Correct. It's Chicago. He has a record. Well, he was breaking a crime. He was selling loose cigarettes. Did he deserve to die for loose cigarettes? Did anyone deserve to die for, because he got a blown taillight out? It is the ridiculous. Well, you're breaking the law, and it's like that. Even if he's just dead and right, you got him breaking the law. That law does not deserve death. Does not equal death. No one was there. No one was hurt until the officer got involved. And it just every time when they do it, and it's you try to show people just you try to show the message of like, listen, it's not police accountability needs to happen across the board. It's more than just a race thing, and you try to turn the message like that to try to get people on board to actually see it. Or you try to say like, well, a lot of these racist laws, you try to put it in the same point of like, well, I'm trying to do this to save cops. This is dangerous for cops. What? Oh, I love cops. Cool. No-knock crimes are dangerous. Let me show you how they're dangerous for cops. Pulling people over for victimless crime because of that's dangerous. Let's not do that. Let's protect the cop. In all reality, it's like this no-knock rape is probably going to happen on a black person. And it's just. The thing is, I like the idea that it's getting more attention. Like everyone, like Breonna Taylor, right? Everyone is shocked with that one, and I'm like, dude, I've got like 10 more articles of that one. I've got one where in Detroit, a cop threw a flashbang through a window of a wrong house. The flashbang lit a freaking crib on fire and burnt a kid to death while they pushed the grandma down on the floor and arrested her as this kid was just getting burnt alive. It is nice to watch people just finally pay attention and actually take the message and actually try to run with it. I still despise the looting and the riots. Violence and theft is wrong. And I'm just glad that people are just finally paying attention, and it's kind of neat to watch it also happen worldwide. If people just trying to go like, yes, stop this. This has to stop it, and everyone's looking for some type of solution. the only solution I can tell is the idea of just like and most people, all we really want is just accountability. To take away the qualified immunity and that they allow someone to at least civilly sue and criminally sue, and they just have people accounted for charges. It is just crazy when really people start jumping into the data of how awful the different situation it is and how protected these people are. Yeah. And before any other cop was like, well, you're creating this us versus them mentality. It's like, they've done that for years. That's what the thin blue line is. It's us versus them. They've done it for years and try to make themselves seem, tries to become the other, this better, this stuff like that, this different of such.
Yeah.
They're not. They have a job, and a lot of them also, which they also have a lot of animosity with their community because they also don't live in the community they police. A lot of people like, well, I know some good cops. Yes, those IMPD officers that some people like, you know what? They probably live in Indianapolis and live close by those communities. Those IMPD officers that are dicks, as soon as 5 o'clock or whatever their shift's off, they're freaking out of Indianapolis. That's why I like Lawrence better, because they actually live in their town. You see them at the grocery store,
Yeah.
Most of if you don't know what I'm saying, take whatever big city town you have, right? Just get up, find the suburbs, and just watch all the cop cars come in the morning or leave at night. Just watch them come in and out. Those are cops that don't live in your community but police in that community. Because that separation, and so these double wall separation.
Have you noticed a difference in the last couple months around this conversation than even, when we were doing the show during Ferguson or Orlando Castile?
I've noticed in the last couple of weeks. Before it was, it was the same old. People would dismiss it or sprinkle some of the case, but with this George Floyd thing, the people are paying attention and want more information, and they just can't believe they've been blind to a lot of it. And
is it that there was such a clear-cut video?
Yeah. Yep. This time it was so clear cut, and that everyone had to pay attention. There was nothing else going on to do anything about. It was just this. There was no sports games. There's nothing. This was the news, and so you had to look at it.
Yeah.
Nothing to distract you.
There's no distractions to it.
Right.
Reinhold, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it might also do with the fact that we've had 3 instances within a month period of time too. Mm-hmm. Right. We had Aubrey, and then we had Brianna, and then now we've got, this one. And it's like the first one was starting to kind of bubble and people were paying attention to it and arguing about it. Then the next one happened. And while people were outraged about that one, this happened. And I think that kind of helps. Mm-hmm. People start to go, oh, wait a minute. This isn't a once in every 6 month thing or once every year thing. This is something that's happening with frequency. Mm-hmm. Plus, I do think that the fact that it was front and center for the news and people were trying to find anything else to talk about other than the COVID stuff. And then this popped on the scenes. I mean, for a while there, we were talking about murder hornets, right? Mm-hmm. That lasted a few days. It still didn't get us where we wanted to go. Right. This popped up, and now I think everybody was just looking for something else to think about or talk about. And they started to get it, and they started to think about it instead of just dismissing it or hearing the talking heads telling them what to think about it.
Yeah. I think we were like watching the video, and you always just kept waiting for cops also do the other tactic of where they try to stop the filming, right? Put a squad car between the camera and the person filming, tell them to back up, go after the camera footage. These things happen.
A 17-year-old girl that took that footage and kept it rolling for 9 minutes in front of cops that were killing him. I mean,
it was a snuff film.
The courage by that girl is amazing. Mm-hmm.
And then to have the one of the policeman's attorneys ask, well, why didn't somebody, if we were supposed to help stop this, why didn't anybody else do that? Why didn't the civilians come over and stop him from killing this guy? And I think everybody's like, you would have killed them?
Right.
Yes.
And if any of those officers, 2 of those officers were being trained by Chauvin. Mm-hmm. So they were on a training run with this guy, and he was responsible for training them. It's apparently been a huge issue. And I think people are listening at a rate that is totally different. Like I went to Amazon last night and was looking at they have the anti-racism books and like the suggestions, half of them are sold out. How to be anti-racist, white fragility. That is white people buying those books, I guarantee it. And if you don't listen to the Pat Down, please do, because we talk about this in this week's episode. And Dion made the point. He goes, people ask me all the time, how do I fix it? I don't know. If I could fix it, I would fix it. But when there is no accountability for police and they keep doing the same thing that they've been doing for literally the entire history of this country, and it never gets solved, it never gets fixed, and the government won't hold them accountable, it's up to the people to hold them accountable. And that's the majority that has to do that. And you aren't doing your jobs, white America. You're the ones that have to fix it. You're the ones who have to step up and start listening. Reading a book like White Fragility, which I bought, I know it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like, and I know that there have been times on this podcast and on the Pat Down podcast where I don't want to seem racist. I don't want to be a white liberal wearing, a Ghana scarf or whatever, Nancy Pelosi. I'm not trying to be insulting, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm trying to be empathetic, but I haven't known where to start, and I don't think most white people, they don't have an idea of where to start, and they haven't really been motivated to do it. And so now they go, no, this is the last generation. We're not doing this again. I watched LA 92, and I'm seeing the Rodney King footage, and those people saying the same things that the protesters now are saying. My parents could have done something about it, but they kept voting the same way. You look at the Watts riots. My grandparents could have done something, but they didn't. They didn't pay attention to it. And I think our generation kind of wants to say, this is the last generation. Now, Remso, you reached out to me because you have a very unique perspective. Harry is a black man in America. Reinhold and I are white. You come at it from a totally different perspective.
Yeah, I'm a racial platypus.
You have a nice filter.
Yeah, and I do want to say, I didn't know about the Tulsa bombings until my brother and I were watching Watchmen on HBO.
Yeah.
So in the first episode, and I'm like, this isn't real. And he's like, yeah, it is. And that shocked the living shit out of me. I had to learn it from watching the Watchmen, of all things.
Yeah. There was race bombings, the move bombings in Philadelphia in the 70s. You look, it's there. If you go, I want you with new eyes or ears to go listen to NWA's Fuck the Police. I own that CD. I bought that CD in 1997. And I didn't listen to the lyrics. I didn't listen to the words. I just love Fuck the Police. Oh, because fuck the police. That man was telling me everything that I needed to know, and it never stuck.
The funny thing about
it took Harry saying something 5 years ago for me to get it. The
thing about the Tulsa thing, there was a specific coordinated effort to bury that in that news story. It was basically just written out of all news and never spoken about by the community ever again. And it wasn't until maybe 10, 15 years ago when people started saying, hey, what's this deal? And survivors were actually coming and saying, hey, yeah, this really did happen. And they started unearthing all of this. But it was a concerted effort to hide it.
Can you explain it for people who don't know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I always knew that black people hated Oklahoma. I just didn't know it until I watched The Watchmen. But basically, the Tulsa bombings, I had to have my brother explain this to me after he finished watching the first episode of Watchmen on HBO, which when I was watching it when it was on was a crappy series. Now I'm watching it and I'm like, wow, these people knew what was up. But basically, it was a collaboration between the local Tulsa government and multiple Klan factions to essentially bomb and eradicate the black population of Tulsa. And when I mean bomb, they were dropping stuff from planes.
Yeah.
It's some Pearl Harbors type shit. It was insane. And I looked back at some of my textbooks from high school. I couldn't find it. You'd think that would be there.
No, you get Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, and you don't get the actual history of what. So Deanna Miss Pat put it to me this way. We were talking about genealogy because I said, oh, yeah, I'm from Germany, and I've traced my line back to 1392 and the cupbearer of Würzburg. And I go, so what's your lineage? Not knowing. And they go, we literally don't know after the past two generations. I go, what do you mean? We literally don't know. We literally can't, because 400 years ago, they were brought here, their language was destroyed, their culture was destroyed, their names were destroyed, their family units were destroyed, and the identity that their white slave masters wanted them to have was put upon them. New names, new history, and so genealogy kind of stops in 1865, and then you have Jim Crow, and then you have Woodrow Wilson, the most racist president ever, resegregating the army, and then you have the Klan in the 20s. You have what you see in the 60s, which you learn about, and you go, we're not that far removed. Like the little girl who went to school in 1965 is in her 60s right now. Like we're not that far removed from it, and so Harry, the reality for Black Americans is that there are still ghosts from that, and to pretend that we have solved all of our racial issues, I just think is stupid. When we can't get rid of government, we all see the effectiveness of government, but that still exists, right?
Right. Yeah. These people are still around. Like, it's like, take Joe Biden, lifelong like politician, and he talks about like how he was there serving with people who were, like segregation and buses. Like, look, listen to this man. He was still in office with these people. Yeah. Doing deal with these people.
In my book, How to Succeed in Politics and Other Forms of Devil Worship, it shocked people when they learned that George Wallace died in 1998. Yeah. That's the year my younger brother was born, 1998. And it's just one of those things. I think Alabama was the last state to basically outlaw they got rid of their law basically saying that people of two different races cannot marry in the state. They got rid of that in like 2000. Like that's 20 years ago.
Alabama in 2000, yeah, the interracial, to remove from the Constitution the ban on interracial marriage, 40% of Alabamians voted against removing that. Now, it was kind of confusingly worded, but the margin of error isn't that strong. Like that's 40%.
It's the whole conversation. I'm lisping. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry, folks. The whole conversation of race in America has always been really complicated because depending on where I've lived and depending on what the main culture is heading towards of that given area, I've always been something different to people. I don't really talk about it a lot, but people usually end up asking me this. They don't ever ask me like online because they're afraid I'm going to screenshot it and be like, look, this person assumed I'm something. But usually when like I've gone to events, I spoke at Freedom Fest in 2017, and I had a lot of people come over and ask me this because they're like, you have a very strange name. You have a very, like, it's just Remso William Martinez. And they're like, it's just where the fuck did the William come from? And I'll admit, like, I get it, but my father, his mother was of German ancestry, grew up in Tennessee, and his father was from Morobis, Puerto Rico. Morobis is like the back hills, like that banjo people, dun, 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 like of Puerto Rico. Like they're those type of people. They're real mountain Puerto Ricans. They don't come out. And that's his parents. And then for my mom, her mom is full-blooded Korean. Her dad was a WASP, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant from New York and Michigan. And somehow all the worlds collided, and I'm here. And my middle name is the first name of my maternal grandmother, William Arthur Brownell. My brother's middle name is Brownell. So when you get both of us, it's William Brownell in honor of him. But it's also, growing up, we didn't really see that as anything but normal. That's just our family. When I go to Florida, they speak Spanish. When I'm at home with my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, we're speaking Korean. And I always knew that it was different. I just didn't know how different it was for other people. So growing up, I was in an active duty military family. I was born in a small border town in Arizona called Sierra Vista. Like, Sierra Vista was like a few thousand people, and everyone knew each other. And it was just a very small, very tight-knit desert community. And then I moved in 2003 to Australia. What was happening in 2003? The invasion of Iraq. Suddenly, all race goes aside. Suddenly, I'm taking all the sins of America. And even though I was like 9 or 10 at the time, all these kids that I was going to school with, all they do is echo what their parents say. And what do their parents know about America? They're getting it from CNN. So suddenly I'm getting bullied based off what George Bush is doing. And that really confused me because I didn't really know anything about anything. I was a kid. I didn't even know where Iraq was. Fun fact, Saddam Hussein was captured on my birthday. And, that it was just really funny. And then I remember coming back to America in 2005, and I was like, I'm looking forward to coming back to the States where things are normal. And my definition was we don't just randomly put the sins of other people on others. And what do I know? I come back and I move to Kansas, and suddenly I'm Mexican. And it just really bugged me because it's like, I'm not Mexican, I'm Puerto Rican. I don't even speak Spanish. But according to the people there, I'm Mexican. And then what happens a few years later? I moved down to Fort Hood, Texas, and I go to school. Now there are real Mexicans, like real Spanish speaking. I just came across the border Mexicans, and I'm white amongst the students. But according to the school officials, I am a non-English speaking Hispanic. I don't know how that happened. But when it came time to fill out forms and to, do sensing meetings with students to learn about the school, where did they put me? They put me in the group of children who were not American citizens, who also barely spoke English. And then here you have me in the class. I'm an American citizen and I don't speak Spanish. And here I am trying to tell the instructors and the teachers, I shouldn't be here. I'm an American. I speak Spanish. And what do? I know that other people who come from different countries where they speak different languages have experiences. They just suddenly ignore me. And the fact I'm speaking crystal clear English to them, and it's, you need to go sit down. You need to go over there. And they're really enunciating it, and they're slow, and they're speaking like I'm a 5-year-old. And I'm like, I only know English. That's all I know. And it was just one of those things where it really began to click with me. How is it I was one thing in one place and I'm something completely different? But the students look at me and they see a white kid. But according to the teachers and the school faculty and everything, because of a clerical mix-up, suddenly I'm a non-English speaking non-citizen. And then things just get stranger because then I move over to Virginia, and I've been here since 2007. And Northern Virginia is very multicultural. I'll say it's even, doubled in its population of people from overseas just in the past 5-6 years. I love living here. But it was also very strange because in high school, people really only hung out with people that looked like them. And it was always very strange for me because here I am. I was one thing elsewhere and I'm another thing over there. And now I'm here and I'm not going to go sit with the kids whose parents are day laborers who barely speak English. The white kids make fun of my name. The one thing that actually helped me was the fact that I was a giant comic book nerd. And you know who loves comic books? Black people love comic books, as I learned. And I go and I hang out with most of my black friends because we would trade and read comic books. And it looked kind of strange. I know that the teachers would look over and be like, oh, is a fight going to happen? Because you have a non-black kid sitting at the black table. And that's how they refer to it. That's where the blacks live. That's where the Colombians eat. That's where the white kids from, the neighborhood across the street where all their parents are former defense contractors live. Is a fight going to break out? And it was always just so strange. And it's been a struggle I've had really my entire life that I wasn't cognizant of until I went overseas as a child. And then I came back as an adolescent. And it's something I still had to deal with. I lived in Alabama for 2 years. I went to Marion Military Institute outside of Selma, Alabama. And let me tell you, living in the Deep South, everyone's going to ask what you are if they have no clue what you are.
Really?
And it's been, it's opened up a lot of conversations with people. It's closed a lot of conversations with people. I've been at places where I was the minority hire and I lost. And then, I lost some jobs because, we want somebody with more diversity. Well, what does that mean? Is that culture? Is that race? The thing that always bothered me growing up, especially in high school and college, was when they give you forms where you have to go ahead and write down, what you identify as. And I really don't think a lot of Americans, and I might get a little testy here, but white liberals really can't tell the difference between race, ethnicity, and cultural identity. I think they really struggle with that. And I say that only because the term Latino was made up by white liberals in academia. Because you go anywhere else in Latin or South America, and Latinos aren't real.
Right. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on the form, I bet we could Google forms where it's like, racial identity and stuff. You've got Asians and Pacific Islanders. Well, what do you really mean by Asians? Are you saying people that are from, Upper Asia, like the Koreans, the Chinese? What about the Japanese? Are you saying that Asians are the same as people from India or Pakistan? And then why do you go ahead and put Pacific Islanders in there? Tom Woods, in his book, Historical Facts About America, They Don't Want You to Know, or something like that, he basically tells people that a lot of predominantly white communities, when they were making up these standards for how to identify which groups of kids are doing better, they saw that Asians were better. Predominantly Chinese and Korean students were doing better than predominantly white students. So what they did was they put, Pacific Islanders who historically have not done very well in terms of test scores and things like that. They lumped them in with the Asians to go ahead and bring down the overall Asian score. And then what they do is they have a, white Latino or white non-Latino. And it's like, well, what do you really classify as a Latino? Because Latinos don't really know what Latinos are. Latino is not a real term. And now they're calling it Latinx to make it, gender neutral. And it's like, you're just making up more things. It's like, subtle hypocrisy with more steps. And it's like, well, I think that I'm white sometimes, but I've been told by other people, I was told by adults quite often, that I'm not white and that I'm dealing with an oppressive white culture. And then, the thing that's always been a trouble for me is when I tell people I'm a Republican or I'm a libertarian, suddenly I lose all my minority points. And suddenly I'm part of the white privilege problem with America. And it's like, but, according to where I am, I'm either white or I'm not white. I can't tell people. I really don't know what I am sometimes. And it's not because I'm trying to be facetious. It's just because it's almost like I'm a Rorschach, and people put what they assume of me and how I look, my complexion. I'm usually darker when I'm out in the sun, or my name, and they apply to me what I am. And it's like, there's like, am I going to defend myself? Do I have to pick something? Why do I have to pick? Chris, sometimes I wish I was 100% something. Sometimes I wish I was full on Asian. Sometimes I wish I was full on Hispanic. Sometimes I wish I was full on white, just so that way I could deal with less bullshit from people. But the truth is, and we discussed this as we were chatting the other night, I'm part of a large and growing population of the United States, which is multicultural and which is multiracial. And they don't have a place in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, millennials are 40% multicultural, multi-ethnic. I think so often it's kind of like, oh, well, white privilege isn't real. White privilege. I guess the way to put it is that I have to learn about this stuff. I haven't had to experience what Remso and Harry are like what you two have just described to me are complicating factors that I don't have to go through. And I don't know how to account for that. I just know that like my racial identity has never played a single thing, like other than the conversations I'm having about race. I don't have the same complicating factors that you guys have. I mean, so I guess you have to explain to me how you view that. But like, I just have figured out like, wow, that's a really complicated story. I mean, how does that play into your psychology, Remso?
It's one of those things where whenever I was starting a new chapter in my life, whether I was at work or at school or something else, I always knew that's going to be one of the first things that come to people's minds. When I started dating my girlfriend, and we've been together for 5 years, that was something that did come up with her family, because we started dating, and then I didn't meet her family for another 5 months, and she didn't meet mine until a few months in, because my family drove down to Lynchburg for my birthday. She didn't know what my family was like. So next thing she sees my parents, two very good looking people that have, very light Caucasian complexion. And the complicated thing is my brother also makes things complicated. My brother, Ryan Martinez, award-winning producer for our show, The Witching Hour. And he has brown eyes and blonde hair and the palest complexion ever. And he speaks Spanish. I don't. That freaks people out. So she saw that and she was expecting, who was she expecting? Tomato pickers? I don't know. But I know when she saw my parents, they were not what she expected. And then when I met her parents, I'll never forget her mom's face, because her some people in her family were like, Martinez, like, who is he? Where is he from? And then when I met her mom around Christmas, I brought flowers and she looked at me and she kind of paused. And I kind of paused for a second. I'm like, oh, she's looking me up and down, like, what's going on? And then it's like, some weight was lifted from her shoulders. And I'm not going to assume what she thought, but I spoke to my girlfriend about it later. And she was like, yeah, Mom was thinking you were probably more Hispanic than you are. And I laughed at that. But then, I love her mother. Her mother's been great to me. She's treated me remarkably. We have a great relationship. But that was one of those things I had to think of when we were first getting to know each other. Would that have been a problem if I was? And I'll never know. And I don't think she's prejudiced at all. She's one of the nicest, caring, most sensitive, compassionate people I've ever met. But it's always going to be one of those lingering things that was there. I'll tell you, one of the funniest moments of my life was when I was an intern at the Media Research Center. I was in Newsbusters, and I had the guy from Newsbusters Latino come in, and I knew who he was because he was the only Hispanic person in the room, in the entire building. And he comes over and he's like, hello, it's great to meet you. And I stand up. And I'm like, what can I do for you? He's like, I have something I want to ask you. And I lost my shit. I was like, no, I know what this is because I've seen it before. I'm nobody's token anything. I don't even speak Spanish. And I liked Mitt Romney as a kid. What do you say? Like, what am I? I'm not going to be able to fit into anything you want. And he looked at me and he started laughing. And he was like, well, I'd like to congratulate you for being empowered and everything. But I was just going to ask you to pay attention to this hour of CNN because they're going to talk about something about, Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And I'm leaving. I just want to know if you can watch it. And I felt so embarrassed. I'm like, oh shit.
How racist of you.
How racist of me. And yeah, it was funny, but
but that knee-jerk reaction is a part of your psychology.
And it was something that happened. I called myself Mitt Romney's worst volunteer. It's actually a literal chapter in my book because by the time that I would have, I needed to get community service hours for school. And because it was an election year, the year before I graduated, I needed to do it. And I liked politics. So I thought I'd volunteer for Mitt Romney. But I found out that Mitt Romney was just a white, boring Obama. And he was just as terrible. So I was like, I don't like this guy. But as I was getting emails back from people from the local GOP, they wanted me to be part of their minority task force and their, Latinos for Romney. And I'm like, I don't get that. Why would I do that? I want to do other stuff. And before I could knock on a single door, make a phone call, do anything, I ghosted them. Didn't get the credit. The credit didn't ultimately matter, but that bothered me. But then things like that kept happening as I got older. So then by the time I get to MRC in 2017, I just lost it. And I felt incredibly embarrassed. And, now I look back and I'm like, maybe it had to happen. But it's something that I've gotten better with handling because things like that did come up. On one of the campaigns that I was staffing for in 2016, they asked me to be part of their, Latinos for whatever his name was. And I said no, because there's nothing Latino about me other than part of my racial heritage and my name. Because, if I had to pick something, I'd say I'm more culturally Korean than anything.
Right.
I know I've never been to Puerto Rico. I don't speak an ounce of Spanish. In fact, when I had to learn a language in school, I chose French because my parents were like, you got to learn Spanish or Korean. So I chose the language of neutrality.
Wave the white flag.
Yeah.
Harry, do you want to talk about your relationship at all?
Well, with what do you mean with dealing with being?
Talked about some of the complicating factors, and I wonder if that resonated with you at all.
I've had some. I think
you're free to say no. I mean,
yeah, but I don't think mine was really questions. It's like I remember having the realization when I was in college one time. It was just kind of hit me, and I kind of like destroyed the white liberals next to me, and they're sort of like, "What's?" And I just sit there going like, "I don't know if I'm here in college because of my merit or affirmative action." and there was just, I took the air out of the room, and I just had left that off my chest. Like, no, Harry, you're incredibly intelligent. Like, yes, I know that. Or I don't know that. It's just one of those unknown knowns. The other thing is when this happened a week ago here at my job. We had a huge, massive meeting, and our boss decided wanted to talk about the Floyd stuff. And he said, and so I'm in a room with a bunch of just quote unquote full blown Asian guys and white people, and it's just me.
Did you get a lot of hugs and apologies?
Well, luckily it was just a Zoom call. So.
All right.
And I just had to like
everyone turn around and apologize to Harry.
Luckily, right, I was also in a room with some nice joking like people, because I turn the mic off, I turn our camera off, and I just turn over them and go, should I play the race card and say this, we don't have any black people in director or C-level management?
Yeah.
That's because I was like, I'm the highest ranking black person in this entire company. This is my time to make a power play. But one thing, like Remso always brought up, is like that hit me when you said like you wish you were 100% of something, because I'm starting to think about like it's because my daughter she's gonna grow up mixed race, and I'm like, oh, what it's and she is going to have some difficulties, and it's not something. I know, but like people was like try to think about that, but it is start hitting on me sometimes. It's like if she was 100% black, she would have quote unquote a tribe to belong to, other than but there's tons of mixed kids she can hang around with, or quote unquote mixed, whatever everyone wants to call that term. It's the easiest term out there. It's just they're mixed. Yeah,
I mean, I
those thoughts.
Reinhold, I don't think I've ever had the thought of like I'm 100% white. Like it just, and I think that's sort of the thing that we miss on our end, is that it's not a factor because society is set up for us. Like We Are Libertarians with Chris Spangle is a libertarian podcast, but let's be honest, if it were We Are Libertarians with Harry Price, a lot of libertarians would go, that's the guy, that's the Black Libertarians podcast. There's that impulse. I mean, am I wrong, Harry?
You are not wrong. That's probably what it'd be labeled as. That's the Black podcast.
I had that problem.
Very July.
Yeah, I had that problem when I was trying to get into broadcasting here in Virginia, because I had a lot of people tell me, you could use a little bit more experience, but you would be great for our AM Spanish speaking show. And I said, well, that's nice if I spoke Spanish,
right?
Motherfucker. No, but I mean, I had that happen honestly all the time. I had like 3 stations between Arlington, Great Falls, and Manassas all say we need somebody for Spanish programming, and it's not like on my resume I put I'm fluent or even fluent in like Spanglish, for example. Mm-hmm. They just assumed it based off my name alone. Right. Because they would never have asked me that if my name was John Smith or something. They would have never asked that. And I'm not saying that as the negative thing to people. It's just how it is. I'm not mad at them or anything. I just know that's an assumption they made. But that really bothered me, because it was like, my only way to be in is to, one, learn a language that I'm really not interested in learning. I'm really not. And second, I have to really double down on being whatever their definition of Latino is. This is why, Republicans always rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like whenever I tried to get into active politics, they always tried to put me in something that had to do with minority outreach or something. And it's like, well, I grew up in middle-class America. Like, I'm not going into, the city. I'm not going into Baltimore or DC for this. Like, if they see me, they're going to see a joke. And that's what always bothered me.
Is the term for that otherizing? I think that I
think that's it. Yeah. And I mean, it was like that with radio. I had somebody literally tell me, if you came up with an alias or a different name, it might work. And I'm like, what's more memorable than Remso Martinez? there's literally only me. What do you want? Like Joe Pags? Oh, what if I change my name to Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck?
No. We need you to be Jose Gonzalez.
Welcome. Yeah, I had a friend who was in the Republican Party, and he was black, and this one guy state legislator walked up to him and said, you know, thank you so much for being here. I really hope that more of you come from now on. Now, that guy thought that he was making a very positive statement, and my friend, who is incredibly funny and smart, looked at him and goes, you know what? I will bring that up at Black Club next time. You know, and
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a thing I say when people ask me about, you know, the Latino community or something. I'm like, well, you know, on our last Skype call with all of the others, we had to, you know, make it quick because the Mexicans wouldn't shut up. But I'll bring it up. Like I bring up the Latino Skype call.
Yeah, and I bring that up because I don't want whataboutism, because you mentioned white liberals. White liberals are just as bad at a lot of this stuff because they come with condescension as well as racism. Because, you know, and Martin Luther King wrote about it. Just look up white liberal racist and you'll see Martin Luther King kind of talk about it. The problem is that for your name to work, Remso, you're the one that needs to change. The rest of us, listen, we just can't get used to your weird name. I'm sorry, you can't. You know, you need to change your name to something that is more fitting, right? Like that is when they say white privilege, that's what they're talking about, is that Remso has to change, not us. You know, and so I don't know why understanding these different frameworks is somehow, I think people think, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong here, I think people think that if they admit a problem, then they have to co-sign the solutions of the other side. So if you admit that public education is a problem, then all of a sudden you're full bore public, you know, for charter schools. If you believe that global warming is a problem, then all of a sudden you have to believe the Green New Deal. If you admit that there's structural racism in the United States, there's biases against people of color, then all of a sudden you're for socialism. And you're an AOC lover. And I don't buy that. I think that is what's holding people back, is that they view it as, if I admit this is a problem, then I'm going to have to probably change some of my behaviors, which I don't want to do. B, I'm going to probably have to have some uncomfortable conversations, which I don't want to do. And C, I might have to start figuring out different solutions than the one I've been advocating for 40 years. Yeah. And so the reality is that the era of comfort is over, whether you like it or not. Like, the reality is that if you believe in a politics of domination, that time is over. The time of empathy has arrived, and libertarians are the best suited to enter that conversation with peaceful, nonviolent solutions to a freer world. And it requires us being empathetic about it and having those conversations, because the other two sides are always going to offer up violence. They're always going to offer up domination. They're always going to offer up the broken structures we have now. Whereas if libertarians can lean into this and start having the conversations that we need to have, then maybe we have a chance at deleveraging those other two sides from their position of violence and starting to have a more empathetic world. I look at the last decade. You look at the advancement in attitudes towards gay people, the Me Too movement, and the change in attitude that people have towards women, the change in attitude towards race. These changes are good. The idea that I will live in a society with other people that have different cultures, different values, different belief systems than me, it's just how it is. Like, it exists, and you can no longer use the state to force the outcomes that you want. And so if you're still buying into violent solutions, like, I think that we need closed borders. Well, I'm sorry, you're just not, you've lost. Like, the world of video cameras and cell phone cameras and pictures of kids in cages, you've lost. Police brutality and law and order and gassing people for political photo ops and campaign ads, you've lost. That world is over. And so the world is nonviolent. The world wants nonviolent solutions. They want peaceful cooperation. And who better than us to give it? But we have to not be afraid to have the conversations about real problems that exist. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose your identity. I'm still a Christian. I'm still a white suburbanite. I went to Chili's the other night. It was the best meal I've had in so long. Like, I'm like, being white, Christian, conservative leaning, libertarian, these things are not going to change in me just because I'm on a podcast with Miss Pat, who is of a completely different culture than me. And I am looking at her experience going, that's not right, or this shouldn't happen, or listening to Remso and Harry and going, like, okay, how can I do something differently, right? How can I give space to have these conversations? Or if you're running a business, think about your own hiring practices. Do you have these underlying bias? Admitting this stuff exists doesn't mean that you're going to start voting for AOC. I promise.
Yeah, and it's okay to admit these things, and you can know these things, and this is how you should treat someone, right? The same way you would treat anyone else. Don't treat us differently. Don't give us special privileges. Do nothing with us. Leave us alone. Let us do what we need to do, and treat us like a regular person. I'm not asking. No one's asking for special treatment. Just.
I'm sorry, but this is going to be awkward now. Dennis and I are going to wash your feet.
Yeah.
So it's just
no, it's not going to happen.
No, we'll just have to say sorry to Remso and Harry, and so we're going to wash their feet.
I'd pay someone to do that.
So don't touch me.
Here's my thing, though. I mean, that's what I like about libertarianism is it's really based on the idea of individualism, that you are judged by you and the things you can control. I was born looking white. I mean, I've got a lot of different mix in my genetic makeup, as it were. I just happened to the dice just happened to roll, and I look white. So, I mean, I was primarily, I guess you would say, dirty German, which was the Aryan Germans who are overrun by the Moors, right?
Dirty German, my least favorite sex move, by the way.
Not as good as Filthy Sanchez, but it is a little bit better than so yeah, I just, the individualism is where I think people are starting to go. When you start having a society that is becoming racial fluid, as it were, like you said, 40% of your generation is mixed. That's going to get bigger. Eventually, this whole notion, which is a societal notion anyway, of race, which doesn't really exist. We're all just people. We all come from the same origin point, right? We can trace it back. We know who that was. So
Noah.
The aliens, Chris.
Eve.
The aliens.
Shut up.
Well,
descendant of the gods. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah, Harry was a descendant of the gods, but the rest of us, we came from the other stuff, the breeding stock. But we all came. We just diverged because of isolation and movements and things like that. We're coming back together as a society as a world, because we have a lot more movement now. So people are going to start intermingling and intermixing, and the whole race thing is going to go away. You don't want to limit your gene pool, right? You want that gene pool to be bigger. Look what happened to the Europeans when they started trying to really isolate and limit their gene pool. It really wasn't a good idea. So you want to broaden that. The same with social ideas, cultural ideas, different thoughts, different ways of viewing the world. The more differences we have, the better as a race, a human race, we can become. As a society, we can become. Embracing that is what we really need to be doing, and not trying to blame one side or the other. A lot of people are upset, I think, because they're afraid they're going to be blamed for all the sins of the past. It's like nobody cares about the sins of the past in you. Nobody's going to assume that you did anything wrong 100 years ago. But we want you just to recognize what's going on around you now. And that's where the frustration is, because people are resistant to that. So I don't know. I always see things as when I check those boxes, which I hate those boxes on those forms, because I just think it's not the government's business what my genetic makeup is. I don't want to give them a 32andMe sample so they can have it on file. I will never do one of those. I check other, I don't want them to know it, and they don't need to know it. When I fill out my census, it's never answered on that form. I always put in number of people who live here, and that is it. That's all they need to know. So let's start seeing each other as individuals who have all different ideas. I know people who are different races who feel like they get stuck into this is what my culture does, so I kind of have to like this, or I kind of have to want to do that, when they really don't want to, right? You don't have to be beholden to what genetic makeup you happen to be. That's not who you are. Who you are is who you choose to be. The decisions you make in your life, the things that you care about, the things that mean something to you, that's who you are, not the way the genetic code happened to happen, or what side of a line you were born on, or any of that stuff, right? And until I think society starts to move in that direction, that's when we're going to start seeing actual progress being made in this. And I'm hoping that we're getting closer there with what's going on. I don't think we're going to be there yet, though. I think it's going to take another generation or two, but I think we're getting there.
All right. Thanks for white splaining.
Yeah, I know.
No, I think there is on all sides, and even on the right, and Trump is a master of this. And it's why, if you look at our Instagram, it's a lot when we post, especially with Heretic and Ryan, when he posts something that's like how to be a good ally at a Black Lives Matter rally. And like it blows up the comments because all those right-leaning young libertarians who are 17 and think Paul Joseph Watson or Ben Shapiro are libertarianism, they can't handle it. They can't process it because this is leftist. Well, they're viewing things in terms of identity. They're not viewing things in terms of ideology. You know, we tend to float based on our identity towards the right or the left, and get seduced by that group. But as people who believe in individualism, you have to hold to the ideology and understand the basic principles, not get persuaded by issues either, because people go, I like this issue, I don't like this issue, and so people drift a little bit. One note, Les has a great suggestion for Remso's name if we're going to change it. Carter Spinwright Woolworth III.
That is catchy.
I laughed so hard.
Esquire.
So no, that was not white splaining. That was legit. Well said. I was just teasing.
Yeah, I mean, Reinhold, he said what I've been, crying out to people for years, but never really had the words to say in many situations, because all I ever wanted to just be, actually, here's a quick story and I'll stop on my tangent. I was interviewing for a job for a weekend show in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the guy who was the program director and hosted the Monday through Friday show, he asked me, so what do you want to be? You want to be like the next Rush Limbaugh? And I told him, no, I just want to be the first Remso Martinez. And he paused for a second. He said, that's the first good answer I've ever gotten from somebody. And it was just kind of funny because I thought when I said that it was really corny. I was hoping to solicit a laugh, but he's only dealt with people that wanted to be somebody else. And I think that's something that everybody has a problem with. I've been watching like a lot of those Real Housewives shows because I'm stuck at home with my family. And it's like all those women who I see a lot of women who married into money and just know all the right people. I see them as all, just all these spoiled women, but they're all incredibly self-conscious. They all want to be somebody else. And I think that's the problem with everything. You look at, Utopia and the story. What did they do? They kept hacking off different groups of people until eventually they were left with nothing. All I've ever wanted to just be is be myself and not have to justify anything to other people. I mean, that's why I liked Ayn Rand as a kid growing up. That's why I still like The Fountainhead. When Howard Roark is like, how do you know what you don't want? To Peter Keating, who's asking him what he should do with his life. How does it bug you not to know what you don't want in life? And that really, that really struck a chord with me because that's all I've ever wanted to do. I meet so many people who deal with the same thing. It's not even a racial identity thing. It's not even a cultural thing. It's just people who want to be seen for themselves.
You mentioned Ayn Rand, and Dan, almost at the exact same moment, says, what's the hot take on Ayn Rand's "the individual is the greatest minority"? Thoughts on this, fellas?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with it, but here's how I see it used. And this is, it's a whataboutism.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So the issue that I see with this phrase, but Chicago, or, why don't they take care of their own? All that stuff is
all lives matter.
All lives matter it's an out, right? It's the same as he had a criminal record, so that butt gets really loud. And so I just would encourage people, if you're saying stuff like that, like, think about it. Are you avoiding looking at the issue? Because it kind of plays into what Josh is asking here, and I'll let Harry and Remso answer this. I have thoughts, but I'm going to be a good ally and let you two answer first. Josh says, I think we're all receptive to the complaints of minorities, but what do we do about it? What policies can we try to enact or repeal that will help beyond our typical quest to minimize the power of government? We are going to do a show about some of this stuff, but what are your thoughts about that question?
Harry, you want to do like a rock, paper, scissors thing? If it's okay, I'll go first. I mean, I've looked at this
higher on the intersectionality scale, so go ahead.
Watching this whole thing, this whole situation we're seeing right now in the wake of George Floyd, it's got so many different conversations going on. But I think the only one that matters is this. And I understand that this is not a point that other listeners of the show have, but I think this has more to do with people who dislike Trump going out, putting up the Black Lives Matter signs, than they actually do care about fixing the actual problems. I think it really comes down to terse surface issues. I wish it wasn't that way, but I think it does. I think that has more to do with it. But ultimately, I think this comes down to the one thing, and I think this is the one term that I love people who aren't even interested in talking politics. I've been seeing a lot more people talk about, and it's this. It's the monopoly of violence. It's the monopoly of violence. And what we need to do is we need an actual equal distribution of the law. What we need to do is we need to respect individual rights and understand, if you wouldn't be comfortable giving your worst enemy a gun to point at you, imagine how they are if you're pointing the gun at them. It's not the fact that, people liked the Patriot Act when George Bush did it, and then when Obama did it, they didn't like it. It's not the fact that now Trump is in charge of the surveillance state, and now they liked it when Obama was doing it. It's these monopolies of force that ultimately bring out the worst in us. And to downsize and mitigate that and limit that in every possible way, that's going to clear the way for so many great things to happen. We had Christian Watson, a Young Voices contributor, right in the Washington Times opinion section last week. If you want to go ahead and help, Black people growing up in urban cities understand, one, the people running those cities, and he never said Democrat. He just said, those people in cities want to run how you operate your business. They want to run what you could do with your property. If you just got out of their way and let people voluntarily associate with each other and make money, amazing things would happen. Oh, and not that it should matter. Christian Watson is a Black man. So, I mean, white liberals, there's your answer coming from the community that you say you care about.
Yeah, that's the libertarian philosophy. Actually, got it's on the correct side of this. A lot of the different things that Black Lives Matter, a lot of these things that they're talking about is that police have the ability, or the state, let's just go with the state, has the ability to enforce certain laws, and they can enforce it where they want and how they want, depending on what they want to do. It is easier to check boxes off and look good and get reelected as a prosecutor and look tough on crime. So what's the easiest thing to bust? The easiest thing to bust is someone who is not going to lawyer up, does not have huge connections to get a big stink on Twitter or on the golf course. And I don't have to hear their mouth when I go back to the Columbia Club. So who doesn't have connections at that? Usually it's going to be at the poor neighborhood. So I'm going to hit the white poor trailer park, and I'm going to hit the black poor neighborhood. So having laws be able to harass these people to have boxes check off, I think that will help out. I think that's one aspect of it. So yes, you could say that, yes, it's the typical, it's going to be this exact same talking points that libertarians have gone to, but more of understanding that you need to be able to wrap it and come with empathy on the person that you're talking to. Coming with it very static or or just not trying to feel or put emotion to people who are not trying to wrap it together for that, then you're just going to seem like, you kind of push them away. They're not going to want to listen.
Yeah, and Dan wanted us to mention he definitely didn't intend to use the Ayn Rand individual greatest minority thing as a cudgel. We all agree with it. I was using it as an illustration because it's counterproductive to use it. And I think that's my answer. And that's the thing that I've kind of like, that's where I'm at with the conversation, is that to be heard is a fundamental human right. And what you hear most often when you watch the news or you read interviews is, I just want you to hear me. I just want you to see this video and hear what we're saying. I want you to understand. I don't want you, like you said, come with a static response of all lives matter, or the individual's the greatest minority, or take care of Chicago first, as if black people are not concerned with black on black crime, which is just insane.
Right.
What they want is for you to give a fuck. Mm-hmm. And when you say all lives matter as an out, and I'm not going to have this conversation, you're basically saying, I don't give a fuck. And I think one of the biggest reasons that we didn't mention when we're talking about why is there this big surge of this conversation, it's that so many white Americans in March and April and May, for the first time in their adult lives, felt the economic insecurity that most people of color feel every day, or that the poor feel every day of any color in this country, because all of a sudden, holy shit, the government is taking away my job. The government is doing something to me that I can't control. They're pointing guns at me unnecessarily. I don't agree with this. This isn't fair. I'm going to protest. And then you go out and protest, and 80% of the country went, I don't give a fuck. I'm not listening to you. And then you get mad because nobody's listening to you. And so they just want you to care. They just want you to listen. They want you. They're not asking you to. I'm sure there are people who are going to want to use this to usher in a socialist government. Yes. Okay, I get that, right? But that doesn't mean you have to go along with that part. But it's separate the problem from the solution and come at this with an open heart, because they're your fellow Americans. They're human beings. They're people. The experiences that Harry and Remso are talking about tonight, that sucks. And what behaviors or language do you use, or reactions to people of color do you have that you can change? I had to learn this when I was dating. I needed good female friends to say, look at this text message. You're being really passive aggressive. That's really gross. This is awful behavior. You're being controlling here and here. And you don't know, like, you don't realize, because you're just operating from the same position that you've always put, like. And then you had to have someone who is in a different, who is not of your group, going, you're doing this thing that I hate. You're doing this thing that everybody hates. And the second I started talking to my female friends, my dating life got instantly better, because all of a sudden I was taking personal responsibility. I was checking myself. I was going to therapy to deal with the insecurity that led to that passive aggressive behavior. Right. And so I had to check myself. And so, has my life gotten much richer because I did that thing that fixed me, that led to better relationships with women, that I treat them more respectfully? Absolutely. Is my life better because I have chosen to start paying attention and giving a fuck about racial issues? My life is better. Empathy and love always makes your life better. And I think that's, for me, the thing that how can I... We love to look at the government. We are obsessed with the government as libertarians. So what's the government need to stop doing to fix this problem? The problem isn't the government. You got to stop blaming somebody else. It's you. You're the problem. You're voting for the wrong people. You're treating people the wrong way. You're not hiring people because of certain biases that you're not even cognizant of. Like, you're not paying attention. You're saying all lives matter. You're the problem. It's not the government. Yes, it is the government. There are things we can change, but in issues and matters of the heart, there is no law that can be repealed, and there is no law that can be passed that can fix an issue of the heart. It has to start with personal reflection. And so that's where I would say start, because that's what racism is, an issue of the heart. Harry?
I was going to get to just say, I despise the whole, when someone says Black Lives Matter, and when someone goes well, what about black on black crime? And it's well, the black guy shooting other black people, one of those people are criminals. So what are you calling these cops? Are they really to call them criminals? criminals or they're a criminal gang, because that's who's doing that, and it's. So I just get enraged when I hear, not enraged, but I just feel like it's a little upsetting when they say that, and it's. And
what is it about that? What upsets you when you meet that static response?
Well, it's like I said, it's because what about black on black crime? Like, well, that's criminal on innocent people. Okay. So, and that we feel unprotected by the police. So when you bring up black on black crime, okay, how are the police not helping us protect neighborhoods? That's what their sort of goal is supposed to do, but they're too busy busting nonviolent offenders. You feel the exact same way when you get pulled over by a state trooper for doing 5 over a speed limit. Like, why are you pulling someone over on a speed this victimless crime when there's easily these police resources and stuff like that can be used to stop your quote unquote angry offense of being black on black crime, and you're trying to compare. And then to me, it's like I think you're don't, because it is like that block. You don't want to see it because you keep bringing up black on black crime, but it's like, but I'm talking about police. This is what we're talking about. So either you do see them as criminals and you don't want to admit it. It's a block on your own head.
And let's take it a step further. Police are only enforcing a law that was passed by politicians that you voted for.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You
Correct.
made choices that led to black on black crime.
Right.
Because you
put the gun in their hands.
You put the gun in their hands.
Yep.
And just to sort of try to answer the question a little bit, that, I'm not going to do as good a job as everybody else probably, but my thought is just make sure you're starting to pay attention if you're not already, right? So one thing that really kind of woke me up a little bit, as it were, to certain things that were going on that I didn't notice because I'm appear to be a white man, just walking around doing my thing, and I don't get hassled too much.
You have a big penis.
Unfortunately, that's true, but it's a pain. But anyway, the thing I noticed, I was with my wife before we were even dating. I think I was just kind of hanging out with her, and she needed to go buy a car. She went to go buy this car from this dealer, so I took her, and she was talking to the guy, the salesman, and I was standing kind of a little bit behind her up against the car because I was like, this has nothing to do with me. This is her buying the car from him. She would ask him a question, and the salesman would turn from her, look at me, and answer. Right. And she was afterwards, she's like, did you see that? And she was just so incensed by it. And I don't think I would ever have noticed that if I hadn't been with her and seen it happen, because the salesman's not going to treat me like that with someone else. So she tells me the story about her and her friend when she was growing up. They were going to go to the Greenwood Mall, and this was probably 20 years ago, so, or a little bit more than that. But her friend says I can't go there because she was black, and my wife's like, why? You just come on down, we'll go down there, it's no big deal. And she noticed, because this kind of brought it up to her attention, she started noticing that when they went into the stores, the store detective would start following her friend around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was all these little things that were happening, and once you open up and see them and recognize that they're happening, it's like you can't stop seeing them anymore.
I went to Saks Fifth Avenue with Miss Pat, and I was wearing Carhartts, a Carhartt jacket and work boots, and I was following around Miss Pat, who was wearing a Falcons jacket. All of a sudden, the security guard ends up at the door we're standing by. And he starts engaging us a little bit. Like, I know what he's doing. She knows what he's doing. She charmed the pants off of him, but you get the subtext there. You get it. I love this suggestion from Rosemary, who says, enacting policies might be too lofty. Simply understanding a person who looks and thinks different than you is a good start. Invite the minority neighbor to your home for dinner just once. I love that suggestion, and I hear like inviting Harry on the podcast and having one black friend put me on a totally different path, right? Having Miss Pat and Dion in my life put me on a totally different path, but it was uncomfortable to get into these conversations. And when cultures bump up next to each other, of Miss Pat is of a different culture than I am. And so there's cultural differences where there's a learning curve that took a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. There had to be a lot of Miss Pat going, you need to just say it. I'm not going to be offended. You need to just ask the question. Like, I'm not going to think you're racist. Like it, because in my mind, like when I read Rosemarie's suggestion, like they're just going to know I'm inviting them over because they're black. And that feels racist. I mean, and Harry, maybe it is, you tell me. We've always joked you're a racism insurance, but I would think that as long as good intentions are there, that's going to be met with good intentions.
Yeah, it's all the racist if you make it racist. Okay. If you invite them over because they're a friend and you want to know something about them, then it's okay. You're not treating them any differently. This is someone new. Okay.
I went on a date one time, my junior year of college, with this one girl who was Peruvian, total smoke show. At the end of the date, she said she didn't see us going anywhere because I wasn't Hispanic enough for her family. Yeah. And I looked at her and I was just thinking, is that racially insensitive?
A certain culture. I don't know that it's racist or bigoted to want to be with somebody who understands your culture and those subtle differences between the two of you.
I didn't take offense to it until like a day later, because I realized that was also probably her saying, probably what she considered the most polite thing to say, because she probably just didn't like me.
Yeah.
I mean, that was probably something, but I didn't think of it until I'm like, oh, all right, well, that sucks. And then I'm driving and I'm like, not Hispanic. What the fuck?
Just not enough.
It's just funny how it is. And I mean, the best decision I made in my life was, going to a military school, joining the Alabama National Guard. And I mean, when you're going through basic and everything, everyone is treated like the same equal amount of shit. It's like Fight Club. You're just trash. You're just trash. I mean, my closest friends were people who I probably would have never been friends with otherwise. But it was because we were going through those challenges together. And I got to meet people from all over the country, from different religions, backgrounds, and everything. I mean, I don't think the United States military gets enough credit. It's an incredibly multiracial, multicultural force in America. It really is. People who come out of there always come out with the experiences of everyone that they served with. And I mean, I'll just never forget. I'm sitting under a tree in Fort Knox, Kentucky. I'm sweating like my ass off, and it's a day of middle training, which basically means we have to wait for another unit to complete something in order to go forward with it. So we've got like 3 hours just baking in the sun. And I looked at one of my friends. He went to another military school. He went to Georgia Military College. And I looked at him like, do black people get sunburned? And he was like, I do. And I'm like, oh. And then so he looked at me, he's like, Martinez, why would you wonder if black people don't get sunburned? And I was like, because I've never seen a sunburned black person. And he just looked at me and his face got really mad. And I'm just thinking, oh, this is where it ends. It ends before it begins. And he just started laughing. He smacked me and he just started laughing and I just started laughing. And it was just one of those things where it was just there and it was funny. And he was able to laugh at me and I was able to laugh at myself because I could actually hear the words coming out of my mouth in that moment. It's just those moments where it's like we were friends before we were anything else. And that's what laid the groundwork for everything in my life. It made it better because of that.
Yeah. I like Wade. Wade says, I like this conversation. Rarely is there a government solution, but there are always individual solutions. And that's what it comes down to. And we're going to start wrapping up and have final thoughts here. But we look at it. This drives me crazy about us. We sit here and go, well, what can we repeal? What can we demolish? What can we get rid of? And part of what I want to do with this show is to get people thinking about what can you do on a personal level, interpersonally, with those 100 people that you interact with. Or with a charity that you could start, or a social entrepreneurial business, or just a business. What can you do to make the world more free? That's way more important than running for office as a libertarian. They don't want me to tell you that, but it's true. You start a charity, you donate to a charity, you spend the day working for a charity, you reach out, you solve racism by becoming friends with people that don't look and think like you and having conversations that make you uncomfortable. That's how you do it. It's not just repealing laws and making changes. That's systemic racism. But where can you do some things differently? If we want to end hunger, let's not pass a law. Go work for go donate to Feeding America. How do we take care of people in a society where there is no large central state? It's going to be you. It's going to be you doing the work. It's going to be me. It's going to be the three of us, the four of us on this show doing the work. And so start practicing, because if you want to live in a free world, it's going to mean you're more uncomfortable, but more rich in terms of relationships, more enriched because of experiences, more enriched because of the diversity and love that you have in your life, and more rich just because you have more money in your pocket, because there won't be that parasitic government. So, you have to start building the world that you want to see, because once you start doing that and people see you, talk to you, they're less afraid of you, right? And so that's really what we need to start doing, is looking at systemic racism, recognizing that this exists, that it is entrenched into the power structure, and we can start demolishing it by doing something about it, which is just loving each other, like having conversations like this. So I promise you, if you're a white Christian conservative male, it's uncomfortable in the beginning, but you're going to be okay. I promise you. And you may say some fucked up things in the beginning, but the person who knows you're coming in good faith is going to say, don't say that. That's fucked up. Right? But just start, right? Because it's all about how you come at people. Because Harry just told you just heard him say, when you come at me with all lives matter, I just immediately stop. I'm just not even going to talk to you. What can I do with you? But if you come with me and go, okay, I don't know why your hair is different. Can you explain this to me? That's going to be met with, okay, right? So just take a chance. So final thoughts. Let's start with Reinhold.
Yeah, just my final thoughts are: be good to each other and just keep an eye out on what's going on, and don't just focus on being the change you want. That's like you said. I mean, in my opinion, we're never going to be able to get to government out of our lives unless we can prove to the people who do the voting that we can do it by going out and doing it anyway. Like if we were taking care of the people in our community who needed health care, why would we need the government coming in and giving health care to everybody if we're already doing it, right? So people are going to say, this is stupid. We shouldn't be doing that. And they're going to cut it out. That's how you start replacing government. Voting is fine. Politics is fine, but going out and doing it is what's going to change things. That's pretty much it for me. I'll let the other people talk.
Remso?
What do you mean, other people? I'm joking.
Yeah, wow. Remember when John McCain said that one, and that was the greatest racial controversy in American politics? Oh, those days don't come back.
Oh, that's funny. I think things happen for a reason, and I think it's incredibly funny that of all the times that could come out, we have a new Bill and Ted movie coming out, when we could definitely use more Bill and Ted. And if I could just take some Bill and Ted knowledge, it's like, be righteous and party on, dude. That's all it is. And if you're a white liberal and you would like to pay some, reparations for me, my Cash App is $. I'm joking. Yeah, just be righteous and party on.
Harry?
I'm not. My Cash App, if you want to pay your reparations directly to me, you could give me some of them white guilt dollars. No. Yes, be excellent to each other. All right. So one thing I always understood is also the people who are also like, when your friends do come to you and they have these conversations with you, especially this is more speaking to the people who are quote unquote minorities, just here, you're just a minority in the United States. you have to have these tough conversations sometimes with people, and then you have to be able to willing to have these conversations with them. Even though right now I'm having some tough ones with a couple of friends about certain things, and it was really rough because he's a white liberal. He doesn't think what he says is racist, and it hurt me first to tell him that, like, hey, what you're doing, what you're saying, that's racist. How is this racist? And I'm like, that's very racist. And I'm sit there and I put it down on paper and like, this is what you're doing. You know, you may think what you're doing is correct, but what you're doing is hurting. And it comes from that corner. It's like, it sucks. And I'm your friend, and I know that's not your intention, but I'm willing to have this conversation with you, you know, because talking and conversations and these long form conversations and learning about different things, this is how we going to get things done and get to this anarchist society. At least my anarchist vision of it is
white food for everyone.
Yeah. Why? Honestly, it's we're gonna have princesses and we're gonna have a monarchy, but they're not really in charge. We just have one. It's good. It's better this way. They don't do anything. We just have one. But no, it's you'd be able to have this conversation and get with your community. It's talking with your neighbors and having each other out and helping everyone out, right? And understanding people in your community and be able to welcome everyone in. It's also just in trying to embrace other people and understand that it's a lot of from a lot of racial relations I get a lot from Frederick Douglass, and the idea of like, I just want to be treated like a regular human, just like you would treat anyone else. And that's all I've ever wanted, is just to be, I just want to be Harry. I want to be treated as Harry, not black guy Harry. And believe it or not, Remso, like black people actually get those conversations a lot. Do you sunburn? I have
Harry, do you sunburn?
I've gotten a sunburn. It took 8 hours on the beach, but I did get a sunburn. I did not know what was going on, but I did get a sunburn.
I know I've asked you that question before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I treated Harry very poorly in the beginning.
But it's also one of those things like you're just curious. But the thing is, like, our education system, because a lot of us got through the public education system, really doesn't teach. Our health system doesn't really teach things about people. Like, of course, people get sunburned because you don't understand what a sunburn is. You just told what it is. I've got several different books. I've got a book called The Quadrivium, right, which talks about mathematical formulas and why we have this. Like, how did we what is it? Because everyone knows the Pythagorean theorem. But why does it work? What is it? There's something beyond it other than a squared plus b squared equals c squared. There's actual stuff to it, but you've been rushed ahead. All right. Science nerd craft. Sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent on that.
We know that Harry sunburns.
Yes. I sunburned. It takes a while. It took 8 hours down on the Cape, but it took 8 hours. All right. Yeah, I'm pretty much done. That's like I said, just it's like I said, just have conversations. Have willing to talk with people, sit around, have a brew, or if that's what you do.
And I'm sure it sucks for you. It's and it's not fair that you have to have those conversations. People should just get it.
Let's be clear, Chris. You get sunburned?
Bitch, on a cloudy day, I look at my ham complexion now in the video.
He's getting sunburned by that lamp.
Yeah.
So I was listening to Left, Right, and Center this weekend, and they had some guest panelists on, and one was Michael Steele, and the other one was another gentleman whose name I can't remember, but he's another black conservative, and they started talking about this conversation. And their reaction was just like, I've gotten so many calls from people about what is this about and what are my experiences. And to be honest with you, sometimes I don't want to talk about it. It hurts sometimes to have to relive and talk about these stories and what I've had to go through. And so I think kind of being aware of that too is important, that just because you have a friend and they, might be black or Hispanic or something else, don't just assume that that's all they want to talk about either, right? Bring it up, talk about things, but also don't make it, understand that you might be bringing up some painful memories for them too, that they're going to have to relive. Right. So, and that's just what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it sounds exhausting, but it requires the discomfort of this generation to have these conversations. So it isn't a conversation in the future generations. Like that sucks, but it is, there's no better way. I mean, it's progress. So, all right, everybody, thanks so much. Just examine your hearts. The fundamental premise of libertarianism is that other people are not your property. They're not yours to control through the state. They're not yours to control through taxation. They're not yours to control in any way, shape, or form using the police or any other means. And just make sure that you live that fully, because until you live that fully and model that for other people, we're never going to get to a society that is truly free. It requires all of us taking on some responsibility and examining how we live with each other. It all comes down to empathy and love. It all comes down to nonviolent, peaceful cooperation. What libertarianism always comes down to. There isn't anybody on the planet that doesn't agree with that, other than the people that want to dominate, the people that want to control. And those are the people we're not going to try and reach. There's no point in trying to spend the rest of this election year trying to talk to MAGA people and to hardcore Democrats and try and shake them out of that. All I can do is do this show for the people that want nonviolent, peaceful solutions that are empathetic and respectful towards all. If you're down with that, then you're headed in a libertarian direction. We'll worry about which things you personally need to understand. Like, I don't know about this thing. For me, it was like gun control. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. But the first premise is that you have to accept that you are going to try and build a world that is more peaceful, more loving, and more respectful, more empathetic, and start heading in that direction, and that's all it comes down to. So that's the good news about libertarianism. It's just that easy. You just agree. I'm going to start listening. I'm going to start having conversations. And the next thing you know, you're on a libertarian podcast talking about abolishing the police, and you go, I don't think that goes far enough. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you check out On the Run with Remso W. Martinez. Make sure that you check out Freedom Strips with Keaton Tucker. That is a show that we'll be adding soon too. And he just interviewed Joe Jorgensen. And hey, if you got something out of this, please share this episode. I'm going to chapter mark it so people can get to this conversation a little quicker. If they don't want to listen to all the Trump stuff, I may separate it out into two. But if you got something out of it, please share it with people. Let them know, hey, this is a great conversation amongst friends. I'd just love for you to tune in, like hear it. Just skip to this minute marker, somewhere around 53. So sharing. That is the best thing you can do to help support us. Our patrons are super important. It really helps us a lot when you join Patreon. If you get something out of what we do at We Are Libertarians in any way, the Heretic Magazine, the social media channels, the podcasts, join the Patreon. That money, that support, that is so important to helping us grow. But if you're not there, share an episode that really got you. That's really a personal recommendation from you to your friends. Texting an episode to a friend, that is so powerful in helping us grow and help spread this message. And I think it's a message that everybody needs to hear, because I think once they hear what we have to say on podcasts like this, they start to see the world in a different way, and we can build a different world as long as you help us. So we really do appreciate it. And thank you so much for your participation. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody online. And we will talk to you very soon.